Redshift Dreamer by Corey Niken. Copyright 2014. Sonar Drum and Smashwords Publishing. Chapter 1. The Desert. How does the world change? She asked. She was the girl without a name. Or if you were like everyone else, you called her Red, like her hair. You wonder how or why? He asked. Red nodded. She wanted to know both. How do things here change so quickly? Why do they? She thought as she crossed a tumbleweed highway atop miles of dust devil landscape. High overhead, massive maroon thunderclouds ran free along the whims of indiscriminate wind currents that crossed the Western American sky. Coils of fresh cloud rolled over the gaps between sky and earth. Riding with them at her back, Red felt as though the clouds were chasing her. The desert changed as she drove. Desert plant and mountain strains intertwined, breaking through the dry western soil. A young man rode saddleback with her on the two-wheeled speeder bike. Together their carefree drive crossed carpeted wilderness, tangled through cities and desert hillsides that jutted up from the lush earth like dirt statues. They sped like the wind across the continent. She had been in desert motels all week. This week Red had undertaken, like the week before, a series of perpetually temporary moves. More than once she forget what day it was. A Wednesday probably. They felt like these sometimes. Tonight she would stay in another hotel room, surrounded by the red Vegas soil, and stare out through another large single-pane window behind coarse double-layered curtains overlooking a parking lot. The quiet hum from a nearby street lamp would sing its one-noted song. One endless electric hum. Then she would pass into the subconscious together with that note. Her dreams would rise into existence across space and time, just like the dream she was having right now with her friend riding saddleback. Of course I'm dreaming, she thought, feeling light-headed from all the pollen. Wednesday, really? She hoped the answer would feel more certain. Maybe if she kept telling it to herself. The bike slowed and Red stepped off, her feet crushing microscopic particles of the rich dark soil and dense wildflower, tiny pebbles rippling under her feet. Dharma hopped off and ran over to the top of a nearby hill. Hey! Dharma shouted. You're curious, aren't you? Yeah, I am. Red walked up to Dharma. The valley beyond looked amazing. Patchwork shadows from the clouds above dotted the ground below, creating a natural texture across the land. The valley stretched for as far as she could see, until it ended into the perfectly straight horizon. Dharma was an acquaintance. She'd known him briefly through these dream state adventures, and was glad their paths had crossed. After all, Dharma was the one who helped Red realize she was dreaming. Yeah, I'm curious, really. What was it we were talking about? I think we're trying to figure out why things change, he said, taking a seat as he thought the question over. Red guessed he was just trying to humor her, since his face appeared to be just as lost as she felt. But looking into his eyes, she saw an inquisitive mind that suggested otherwise. Well, this place is real. You know that. It is getting more real by the day too. Have you seen any more signs? Dharma asked, smiling. The corners of his cheeks stretched to both sides of his mouth in a rosy smile. No, I don't think I have seen any signs. What do they like? Dharma grabbed her hand. Ha! Your fortune. There it is. He pointed right into her palm. A warmth spread across her hand from the contact. Being here, her thoughts moved like thick gel. She hated fortunes too. The arrogance to pretend one knew the outcome of zillions of particles all randomly bouncing against one another without any proof. Just wrong. She tugged at her hand. If you're not a jerk about it, I'll let you read it, she said. If you are kind, I'll let you read it, he said energetically. Red didn't bother to argue. She returned her hand atop his. Are you ready? He asked, peering down at the temporal creases and indentations. Her calloused fingers might have said more about her from the coarse metal residue and dirt wedged in the creases. Red was neither skeptical nor superstitious about Dharma's abilities. They were just two people wandering the dream landscape without any pretenses. But she didn't like the idea that he might tell her something unpleasant. This dream was going on rather nicely. He sensed her hesitation. Trust can be for another day then. I'll let you get back to your questions. Red let out her held breath. No answers then. Well, that's half a fucking relief. Dharma stopped trying to dig inquisitively into Red's questions after that. He had already seen the road map on her skin. Instead, he took a bigger interest in the maroon sky above. What his eyes saw, he only hoped was innocuous. Dharma used his free hand to make an invisible design in the air as he motioned in circles of decreasing successive size. In his hand was a small turquoise stone. She guessed it came from his pocket with the sleight of hand. It was either an easy magic trick or one of those happenings that you just had to allow yourself to suspend belief. He blew onto the stone, whispering a set of words so quiet that she couldn't recognize the sounds. The stone crumbled into fragments of loose turquoise dust that fell through his fingers and blew into the light breeze towards the valley and plains. "Well, you can always find me if you're lost," Dharma said. He broke into a bellowing laugh, revealing sharp laugh lines that somehow grew wider. He rolled into a howl. "Fucking Dharma," Red said. He was always a bit of a showman. But the effect was undeniably stirring. His laughter intensified as the sound echoed throughout the landscape. Dharma's laughter reverberated from the hills around them and even from the sky. All the while a heavy fog rolled in from the valley, shrouding them in grey. "And now you will wake up and see a sign, I promise you," Dharma said, still chuckling. He clapped his dusty hands together, sending forth a sound intensified as it echoed, another illusion of power, though perhaps it was. The fog blew in heavy gusts, coinciding instantaneously with the movements his hands. The fog blew in thicker and the wind howled louder. Red's skin could feel the pierce of many invisible shards of frost. She couldn't see Dharma as clearly through all the fog, her line of vision faded. Dharma gave Red a slight wink, his sparkling irises were the last detail to fade to grey. In the next moment Red lay awake staring up at the ceiling. It was midday. Awake. Awake. Red yelled. Her instinctive cry was a shock to her system. Her body shot up and out of its paralyzed state. She didn't expect to be pushed into the waking day so abruptly, but there she was, kicked out of her own dream. Red sat on the rock-hard mattress of a run-down one-story motel room. Scorching sunlight seared through the cracks of the floral curtains. Their underlayer, a sun-faded beige top, did little to hold back the overpowering white light. A neat little circular table sat alongside the curtains along with an idling air that conditioner kept it company with a continuous hum. Just outside the street lamp stood quiet now, its functions dormant. And just outside a parking lot lay empty, save for a single motorbike speeder. Hers. Red reached into her side bag for her mobile comm device. She checked the mail first. Messages popped up after having been off for many hours. Her trailing, partially unconscious gaze focused lazily on the proactive screen animations. She was trying to remember what had happened yesterday. But there's no time. A message labeled appointment reminded Red of today. She shot out of bed, threw everything in her bag and barely unfastening the door chain, and without another thought hopped onto her bike and sped off. 3. Electric monsoon. How do you describe this place? It is as it has always been, probably. The storms came in far too often, and yet clean water is scarce. When it did come, a luminous electric snake made of 1,000 jagged needles burst into the sky, tearing holes through the clouds, dropping burning hot rain down onto the earth. The drops would promise to fall, but instead became one with the air before it could reach the ground. The dust would rise to meet the falling rain, desperate to drink. But there would be none and the dust would scatter, blowing sandstorms across the earth. The wind would arrive next. Its million invisible tails whipped the skin of any person stranded in it as it would gallop as a sea of dust, playfully covering everything. The earth would be swallowed up by the gusts of raw wind as everything lay covered. The wind would return back to the sky, bragging of its turbulent acts. The electric snake by then would split into thousands of smaller spiky allies. They'd travel down to greet the wind with more hot rain and violent fire spark. And when it looked like they finished conversing, the rains would hold their tongue, the winds would freeze, and snakes would hide behind the deep velvet atmosphere. The whole sky would take a step back as the thunder joined in the foray. The trio would all be present. Their game would start again. All three would simultaneously show off their cruel talents to one another as they lay havoc to their earthly playground once more. The heavens would change from deep purple into a fiery shade of violet-red, stretching out its many magnificent color variations with searing rain, vibrant electric mist and deafening roars. The electric season wouldn't be for another 5 weeks. Already the clouds have been trailing in. When the season did come, the weather would remain alive and violent for half of a year. But as it was, only smaller storms passed through that didn't stay long. Their short-lived phenomena were only teasers of the monsoon season to come. The Earth's inhabitants would go out, able to glimpse clear patches of sky. The true demon monsoon at rest and her children not yet energetic. It was 5 weeks before the dark days and uncertain nights came alive. 4. Vegas, USA. Red rode through the dusty flatland of Vegas with a noisy buzz from Tron, her speeder bike. The scorched, barren motherland welcomed the energetic young girl with open valleys and desert heat. Moody mountains held open their wide jaws, speaking wordless greetings of hello using the mellow earth and enormous boulder hillsides to show her affection. One of her children had returned. Red felt at home on the open road. It was scorching, but she protected herself with a matte black, form-fitting, heat-resistant set of gear. Her protective helmet did its best to save her buoyantly tangled hair from the elements, locks of brownish-red hand-cut by a friend. She felt a stray strand. The mane had grown shaggy, so she considered finding an old friend to trim it while here. Red had been riding through the western countryside for hours this morning, having left the economically affordable Long Beach floodlands. Having come this far and not yet arrived, she wonders for a second if maybe she should have waited another day. Instead of looking forward to seeing this Christmas tree of a town and all it had to offer, she only craved a deep bed to sleep in. Seeing the stark daylight sky between here and the road ahead only made Red crave that next forgettable night in that next forgettable motel room even more. Vegas was the same place it had always been. Every person and place on Earth had an alternate life there. Their cloned and disjointed existences seemed to be shorter-lived mutations of their less caricatured parallel counterparts from a world beyond. A better-looking twin or some other more perfect clone must have existed somewhere else in this world. Red believed this. Nobody felt like they were their true selves here. There had to be someone more authentic. To that note, there is a tale. It goes, once upon a time those magnificently awkward twins were complete strangers, born of mysterious wombs and from fathers of folklore. As they grew older they were told only that they had a family, and were given only the names they now carried. Stratos, Luxie, Nuva, Emmy, Trampo, Liana. But all other details of their lives were lost. As they grew older the children each developed unique personalities. Sometimes they embraced those and other times they grew into completely different beings. They were always embracing their fantastic imaginations and sometimes thought about what their mysterious families had been like. There were so many spiritual twins in Vegas that it soon became known as the Land of the Lost. The lost children grew to create families of their own. In their self-made existences, they stood tall, like monuments to the familial heritage that they now nurtured. There was nobody misplaced or misunderstood. And with every monsoon, the children drank the lightning-hot nourishment from the sky and grew taller with the strength of their providing earth. Every storm made them stronger and more alive. They learned to coexist with the electric lifeline that ran through them and dreamed of using their gorgeously strong legs to walk and go see the families they dreamed they had. The people who lived there traveled the streets and inhabited small homes, but they thought little about the twins who also called this place home. They did not hear the voices of their city, nor did it matter. If the spirits of greatest cities were not real, then the children of Vegas did not know. To them, their spirits real and they were very much alive. The cities spoke to each other and learned from one another. One child spoke to the next, and the other shared as well. They all shared their wealth of knowledge. Each day they became more alive. They became her. They became Vegas. That was the tale at least. Far away from Vegas, the remaining world had existed probably as it had always done. The rest of the planet spoke just as any person would assume it communicated. All the cities of the world had bloodlines made of subways, nervous systems comprised of cable wire and computer box neurons. The sores were its digestive tract. It was alive as well, but it was not the same as Vegas. Those cities did not have ears and mouths and could not hear Vegas speak. Beyond the desert borders a road was just a road, and a European revival Parisian 1900s themed hotel was just that, a hotel with a Paris facade. Like an inanimate object along the Central Parkway, it housed temporary guests. It did not aspire to grow taller into the skyline, but rather accepted any construction that was to be built on it. Outside of Vegas, things simply happened. 5. Welcome. Holy Frank Sinatra, why am I even here? Red's yell echoed against the inside of her helmet. She'd stopped ceremoniously near the signpost marker that stood atop the original border divide. In rusted black letters it said "Welcome to Vegas." The sky suddenly lit like a solar flare as a thunder clap shook the air. That must have been the sky welcoming her. She was still 20 kilometers away from New Real Border. A ghostly boom town etched its existence nearby. Red rode on, still confused why the world had become a much emptier place so quickly. That passing signpost wasn't simply a shantytown indicator or a happy home marker. Instead, the border divide said many other things. It marked the location of spontaneous hookups and secretly planned meet-downs. Broken condoms and ripped drink tickets signified proof that quick escapes happened here. The earth hid and buried discarded all of these signs. Plastic wristbands, beer bottles, discarded underwear. The stories here were about love. Always, always, about love. Back on the road, Red peered over at the upcoming broken road jutting north. There was 2398th Street, still a desolate scattering of tract housing ghost mansions. Forgotten warehouse districts were eagerly built adjacent to those, preparing for a housing boom that never came. Instead, there remained only empty monoliths that no one but squatters could afford. The next inhabited region peaked near 200th Street, where the gas houses congregated. These were thin-walled square canisters fashioned into living quarters. 2 trashcan fires burned hot near a street corner down the way. Neighbors shared their comfort foods on patches of broken asphalt street. Thought it was near impossible to see, brittle hands sat over the heat of flame as they cooked small containers of food. This world had not been blessed with love to give every human being a cushioned life, not yet. Why they chose here was speculative. The struggling beggars may or may not have heard about the portended arrival. Subconsciously they hoped it would come. They prayed that here, somewhere in this vast barren desert, the oasis would spring up with unlimited resources. A desert oasis. They waited with label-less cans and donated blankets. It was also what Red had been told. Love was coming. The struggling people held dearly onto what little they owned, these empty little spots of earth, those rusting dumpster canisters, those junkyard dreams. Together the men held their meals tight and shared body heat and what laughter when things got cold at night. Red never thought to ask if anyone knew about the stories. If there was truth behind them, if it was just some lie someone had told her as a child. These were just stories to stay hopeful. A woman with a large bundle balanced it dexterously. The harsh environment had left signs of its existence, eating away at the buildings the same way it scraped at people's weathered faces. The woman's sand-covered shawl might have once been a proud sky blue, but now it only showed dust and age. Red eyed her own sun-speckled face in the rear-view reflection of her holographic dash. Her bike wasn't new, but she maintained it clean and it ran well. The wheels were standard-issue ground repulsors. The engine ran on 16-horsepower atom diffusers, and her visual navigation was completely homebrew. Plus her dash's name was Tron. The road was empty and Red grew accustomed to him. He was all she had sometimes on long journeys. He was a good partner. At first Tron interacted with Red like any other of the default AI dashes. One's of a HAL 3000-esque profile. He was poignant in his thought process and spoke of safety features religiously. Red remembered finding him among the scraps of discarded bikes at the back of a junkyard heap. It was hard to miss, that blast-resistant hardware casing, the like-new quantum processor. A completely unexpected find. And it worked. Finally she found one where pressing on actually loaded it up. The cute loading screen popped into action, showing a friendly cartoon bike pretended to wake up from a nap. Red smiled. Tron smiled back. He was a cute robot toy fused into a standard-issue navigational dashboard. His global satellite mapping could potentially connect to the worldwide access net, and he was free. Initially, his hardware started off being faulty, having been in the scrap heap for some time and losing parts as pickers pulled from him what they needed. But Red took the challenge of building him back up. She spent at least 2 months looking for all the missing parts in other junkyards. As time went on, Tron's onboard system became more functional, even improved. Red felt proud of her accomplishment. He could speak more clearly now and predict road patterns. Soon Tron could even make use of the bike's lesser-known sensors. And her speeder actually ran quicker now that Tron could modulate the engine's many functions. As time went on, Tron's voice grew deeper in tone. Less like the Eduardo profile programmed as a default, and more like Tron. His mannerisms and even his accent all shifted a little on their own. Perhaps the changes took place after her repairs. Maybe just a side effect of the wear and tear on machinery. Tron wasn't the perfect find. His processor slowed down on rainy days and sometimes his computers stuttered in extreme heat, but he worked great for the most part and Red was always thinking of ways to mod him. Dashes were hard to find in good condition, but the way Red had modded hers, she could sell him for a good price on the market. That's when she realized she could build them for other people. Word got around about Red's lucky dash. They said a young woman out in the middle of the desert was a junkyard tech with a knack for making durable dashes. Few people had the know-how to build tech. With the terrible weather, a dash that could support infrared repellents was a great asset. Tron, like most dash units, came equipped with this. Red began her business of making dashes. Over time, even body shop mechanics in Clark, Vegas gave word. The ones she made worked beautifully. When roadsters installed them, their engines purred. There was something special about the way that little girl put machines together. By now Red had made tons of dashes faster and more featured than Tron. They had brand new case bodies and sported cool anti-theft features. She thought about using the new models instead of her old Tron, but always something sentimental about him made her refuse the upgrades. "I can't let you go, Buddy T," Red would say. But Tron had nearly fried completely one weekend. She got a new candy apple red body casing prepped and transferred as much of his original hardware into the new housing. He worked great, but of course slightly differently now with the new parts. It was most people's assumption that the world had stopped making great dashes long ago. Tron was one of the last ones on the ZX production line before the motor tech crash. Of course Red wanted to save him. 6. Tron. Nearly 4 p.m. The city approached. Tron's boosters shifted into cooldown as the passing neighborhoods condensed. The space between their walls closed in, soon any gaps disappeared altogether. Fences became gates. Gates became enclosures. The houses had no choice but to grow taller. The people here walked with little compassion. Their slumped shoulders connected to arms with tight grips that held their UV-resistant coats tightly. Perhaps it wasn't protection from the sun that they held tightly onto, but something inside themselves. Maybe they were protecting themselves from being robbed of it. Anyone with a proud walk had some of it left. They wouldn't last here. Did Red know what it was? She had walked like that before too. Tron lit up. "Get ready, girl." Red was nearing her destination. Still another 2 miles to go. The large warehouse squares of this area stood out to her like memories. Little sprinkles of sand from the long drive dusted Red's face. This was not the place it once was. The peeling of iron and metal reminded her that much had happened here in her absence. Here concrete pole and rebar reinforcements protected pieces of homes. Junk piles of scrap sat on every other city corner, wasted, materials free for the taking. A man with a load-bearing wagon scavenged through the piles, pulling pieces of wood and metal scraps. Across from him another man dug furtively on the other side. Meteors, satellites, and broken ships. That's what fell from the sky these days. A hole in the clouds let sunlight through now. Red looked up to see a battalion ship floating effortlessly through the fluff. Around it 100 other airships were sporadically stationed in the sky above. Each vessel was as unique as the people who commanded them, many were military. Many others were voluntary enlistments. A few might even have been automated droids. They were the men and women who protected their country below. A debris shower was set to come in the evening. In just hours, those hundreds of ships would light up the night, shooting up falling debris. Cannoneers and flight tacticians anchored their ships in the ready. At around 6 or 7, the whole sky would fill with colors. Nearly the whole spectrum would be visible in all of that photon blast. The neon blasters often shot things reddish-orange, and the tritium phasers typically made cyan bursts. Red learned a little bit of it from friends, some who enlisted. Small explosions and massive ones would fly. Fluorescent smoke streams and dust would be everywhere. It might look like the Independence Days of the past if there were enough ships. Not only would people watch the spectacle, but most would also pray. What the battalion missed could turn homes into wreckage like the one red-watched men sought through. The militia program started 2 years ago and helped the failing communities protect themselves during these times. In exchange for services with the battalion, airship pilots were granted moderate quantities of fusion core. It was liquid energy. It could be used like cash. Fusion. It powered everything. People moved to the cities for it. Not only because cities were the safest places in the world, but joining the Earth defense was the most stable work. The core, it could power laser cannons, ammunition, power homes, ships. It juiced up anything that needed power. It could be bound in containers, traded and sold. Pure as gold and temperate as water. People lived on fusion. And apart from the trade, being a part of the battalion also carried a small weight of honor, but the energy payout was what made it work. Just then a thick pink cloud of laser fire burst into the sky. The clouded sky filled with the sound. The world was otherwise peaceful. 7. The Dreamer. How do you describe the dreamer? Flit asked. Well, let me tell you. He breathed deep. A group from a potential investor firm was touring his lab. It's a simple device really. You can attach it here. He pointed to a spot on the mannequin's shoulders. Just position this part towards the cerebellum, here where your 8-pound brain connects to the rest of the body. Now it should read neural activity wirelessly and not get it confused with the rest of your nervous system. See how the signals are being read through the membranes here? That's the beauty of the red. Some of the guests looked genuinely impressed. Flit could feel relief flowing in. He was glad to have gotten the presentation off to a good start. Some of the guests looked in awe at the different workstations of his cluttered laboratory. He really should have cleaned up. But there were just too many breakthroughs at the moment and he was working non-stop. You see, the Hongtech electronic impulse reader is capable of reading those delicate electrical responses with precision accuracy, feeding back the response to our computers. Typically the signals, you see, are too similar at 0.07 ohmz. There would be absolutely no unique information registered on traditional electrical meters to get the results we need. And that's not what we want. One of the med students eyed the oversized screen that was running static video tracks in 3 dimensions. And yet the brain is really a simple structure at its heart. Flit felt like an idiot, emphasizing his speech, but he was the only free researcher at the time to give a tour. Yet at the same time it is incredibly complex. If one electrical impulse registers, it flows throughout the whole brain system, making any and every brain impulse important to discern. And at what rate do all those neurons fire? We've estimated there to be approximately 1,000 per second at full brain activity. He turned on a machine. The static screen alternated different visual patterns. A pulsating blip of white light emanated like a heartbeat. But 1,000 synapses per second, not a difficult feat to map. Here you can see the pulmonary system taking over the visual feed. If I tune it, now we are dealing with parts of the central nervous system and a few others. He breathed. But here's where the challenge gets tricky. We've isolated the central nervous system. And somewhere in these criss-crossed signals are our dreams. Pictures a little fuzzy still, you see. The screen was all static. And so the intellectual scientist wonders, how do you map all that nonsense? Well, the intellectual scientist would try to decipher that as well, but typically come up with nothing, because each one of us is wired so vastly different. Seeing the same things would show up completely different from two separate minds. Typically, Flit breathed. Well, not so thanks to Hong Tech. He had to emphasize this because of the huge grant from the Chinese subsidiary was on a deadline basis. Flit had been working on brain mapping and REM neuron biology for months. He wasn't sure when his physics and engineering degree took him into the biological side of the medical field, but here he was. Everything still looked like fuzz on the screen, and Flit wasn't sure how images of static was going to convince his audience that his company's technology was making steps in the right direction. The data came in great on paper. Thousands of unique synapse patterns were all being recorded superbly, but looking at it was like piecing a million-piece puzzle together or trying to make sense of a human genome from GATC printouts. It was like playing a film and not having the right encoding software. Flit needed more time, more funding, and more something. He spent endless nights staring what looked like digital film grain. The same film grain his audience was looking at. The difference is that Flit had been staring at it for months, and after a while his thoughts turned to runny eggs and he assumed that the visual mind map was empirically impossible to understand from a computer standpoint, regardless of what his and his colleagues' papers said. The depression hit and Flit took himself to dark places. He was able to discover incredible existentialist epiphanies in himself through those egg puddle thoughts at 3 a.m. in the lab. At one point he imagined he, himself, was a machine. He felt useless, but through the experience gained an impeccable work ethic that kept him going on tirelessly like a robot. At the end of the day he returned to his human self and learned he lost an entire week to pretending to be a robot. Lucky for Flit that he somehow sidestepped most of the depressing navigational waters that traditional existentialists had stumbled on before him. Flit was still alive and not tucking away medical supplies from the pharmacy yet. The tour had gone on for nearly 20 minutes. Flit was anxious to finish the first segment and take a smoke break. Of all the things he wanted to do, seeing red again was his tops. After all, she was the pearl earring of his work. By a miracle, the tour had gone amazingly. Everyone had tons of questions and two of the men had handed Flit business cards from them and their partners. One was a pharmaceutical firm branching into nanotechnology, the other was a securities company. All of this will do a whole lot of good if I can't even get my research into the next phase, he thought. A marbled brain model sat directly in front of Flit, staring at him challengingly. He liked the cool polished surface. Its ridges were almost like rudely humid eyebrows. "You're kidding me," it seemed to say. He wanted to punch it to the ground. No, he wasn't kidding it. The codec couldn't be deciphered. He almost wanted to interpret a dead Latin language instead. The cerebral recordings had changed in output for little over a month. And the data he compiled looked even less recognizable than it did at the last progress check. He called Red. "Heard you were in town." "Hello." She sounded sleepy. "Are you busy later?" "No, why?" "I need some fresh air. Let's go somewhere." The sound of her voice, he couldn't help but smile. "Sure, when are you free?" He liked taking Red on adventures. She once nearly killed him after they spelunked in an underground cavern system. They'd stumbled on what was originally a bomb shelter that leaked into an underground stream. There was poor light and the water had been collecting in shallow puddles. She'd slipped, but he caught her narrowly by the side pack. Red nearly had a heart attack when they finally got to solid ground and shined some light on their situation. Nasty translucent spiders made homes in the cave's walls. Still, she forgave him for bringing her and he forgave her for a near-premature death, and they had many more tame outings since. "Let's go looking for aliens." "Sure. Sounds fun. I have a few things to do first today," Red said. Flit knew a friend who could lend him a portable telescope. He was already planning the night. They would have a themed dinner of gummy UFO jello shots and hoagies. There would be drink saucers of milk, and they'd stare through the portable lens into an infinite view of the night sky, surrounded by awesome rock formations. Tonight might be the last clear night for a while. Flit wanted to sit down next to her and kiss her on the cheek. She might smile. He would too. She would set her bag aside and embrace his tender hands. He'd reach into her blouse, making contact with her supple breast, and kiss it lightly. She'd kiss him back, exploring his soft neck as their clothes fell. Souls intertwined. Red disconnected the call. She already knew how it would go. Flit would reason with himself to let his emotions take over, and they would enjoy a peaceful night staring out towards Pluto. Red had known his heart longed. When he looked at her, she never knew what to say. In all her days and nights, Red could let flower petals of emotion blossom, and raging monsoons of passion crash onto her shores, sending powerful orgasms between her and strangers. Their lust would ring pure but finite as their raging emotions would ebb back to calm. But to Flit, Red could only remain speechless and let herself say nothing in those moments. "You're a nice guy. But I'm not." She contemplated the sound of those words in different intensities and accents. "It's just I have another boyfriend that might be a tough one to make convincing." If pressed, she wouldn't be able to describe anyone else very well. As odd as it sounded, Red had a hard time lying. "I have this health condition." She probably would stop searching for excuses and they'd press bodies together, sex under moonlight. The night came. Flit had sent Red the location, a spot in Hayford Park. He already had a telescope set up near the rock formation called the Earth's Fingers. Its lens was set on Venus. She arrived an hour past sunset. The directions were vague, but Tron filled in the gaps and Red found the Earth's Fingers. "You forgot to put what exit," she said. "I figured you'd find the right one," he said as she sat down next to him. "They say looking out towards the lost city tonight might give you a good view of the storm shower." The world felt perfect from their vantage point, a ruin from a past generation made of clay and local stone. There must have been adobe walls and little squares for windows once. Shards of pottery might be buried deep underneath. Both Flit and Red gazed at the enumerating star formations peeking out from the atmospheric haze. The multi-billion-year stardust glistened in their eyes. Red took her hands and pressed them to Flit's heart. "Thank you," she said. She had been regretting being back until this moment. A shooting star grazed along the canvas of sky, falling into the Earth's horizon, leaving a fading white streak as it disappeared. The night went on silently, just two souls immersed under the endless sky, simply existing. It was an unsaid wish that the two longed for this moment to extend forever. Their heads grew heavy, supporting one another until they fell asleep under the night sky. For all the sand, grass and tumbleweeds around, they didn't have the desire for anything besides the dreams that were now soaking in. The untamed wilderness mattered not. Flit wished sunrise might never come. As he slept, he envisioned the same desert he was in, a dream self waking up from the nap, Red still asleep at his side. The clouds spoke with personified words, wind gusts making the syllables with its wisps across his ears. The words went like so. "How are you?" "Fine, thank you," he replied. Being that it were a cloud, he wondered why responding felt so natural. "I'm fine. But my research." His mind buzzed with the same questions he had in daylight. "I can't get this question out of my head." The cloud dispersed. As it did, 1,000 little bats and moths rose into the sky, turning their meeting into a dinner feast for the bats. He looked up, not sure how to take the feasting of insects. But the bats gleefully flew, dancing around one another, happy and free. "Well, there goes my answer," Flit thought. A lizard popped its diamond head around the corners of a shallow rock and crickets started their symphonic call. Flit couldn't see perfectly well, but along the horizon a small pack of wild animals moved through the countryside. He checked again for the cloud. It was miles away now, darkening the desert with rain. He checked back on Red, laying himself down next to her as he fell back asleep. He was in his lab this time. He'd spilled coffee all over his notes, a piece of exposed circuit board sparking from contact. No. He wiped the coffee off, barely saving the dripping notes. They were written in gibberish. He set them aside, now doing his best to salvage the board. Something caught his eye. One of the monitors playing the scene of him in the desert watching the bats feeding. He looked closer. The rain was pouring. Helplessly he held his jacket over his head, trying not to get drenched. Filt looked back at his lab self, his own clothes also soaked. He made a double take. Red was gone, he was in the desert. Pouring rain. The adobe ruins was flooding, as was most of the desert. Red stood by her bike shivering. "I'm not cold, but let's get out of here," she said. He hopped on the back. Together they went up the highway, driving foot deep in water. "It's nice being with you," he shouted. The wind kept her from hearing him. She nodded back quickly, a deaf acknowledgement of whatever it was he said. She smiled, her hair somehow not whipping him in the face. They'd arrived somewhere. Red's engine cut off halfway. "Oh no." The only words Red said. She slowed her bike further. An old iconic hotel stood up ahead, its shape like a vertical fish. Even from here he could tell it was an old building. Some of the windows had blown out, the once polished white walls slowly changing to the color of the sandy earth. Out of nowhere the sky pulsated a brilliant blinding flash of white. Red reacted, immediately hitting the thrust as she turned them both around, now increasing speed exponentially into the opposite direction. "Where are we going?" Flit asked. "Not here," she remarked. He could see the clouds darkening along the horizon, an electric storm brewing in their dark folds. Everywhere the storm choked up on them. They were inside one massive eye of the storm. Even that darkened, the spot of clear sky above them swallowed itself whole. Flit felt the need to look back at whatever it was they were running from. Long spindly trails of electric green light shot up from the ground, meeting equally catastrophic spears of electricity from the sky. Like Tesla coils they traversed over every surface they could reach. Where they made contact the soil met with violent blast. Red was going nearly 200 kilometers per hour. The flooding earth in her bike's tracks shot like fountains behind. The sky itself seemed to singe along the electric fiber pathways through the air. The atmosphere was being eaten away by those electric things. All the while the white pulsating never ceased. Flit held tight onto Red as she rode at max speed. It wasn't enough. She flipped on backup thrusters. The earth below rumbled. Whether it was their vision or the whole world itself, the water surface vibrated with incredible lividation. She dodged a tall boulder. A scream that split the heavens ripped out from behind the maxed-out bike. The scream was incredible, it felt as if it came from inside their heads. Faster, the bike's momentum allowed it to glide slightly faster. The electricity now burned hot of brilliant radioactive jade and streaks of bold maroon. The neon electric chaos was overtaking even their peripheral vision as it seemed to be covering the world en masse. Everything was being swallowed in light. Flit woke up, sweating. The unassuming morning sunlight peeked from behind the eastern hill. He was alone, his telescope neatly packed next his car. 8. Sleep and pills. The blinding white sky shone over lovely Vegas today. It had seen storms and droughts. On days like this there was not a cloud in the sky. The need for carrying a xenium crystal was high. Down along a desolate cluster of houses, stores, and a few motels was Tron parked outside, running his automated commands. Today's plan was simple. He would fill Red's itinerary with a list of nearby junk shops. He had marked 8 suppliers on the map likely to turn a profit. "It looks like we have a violet storm of things to do today. Would you like me to prioritize them in order of relevance?" Red sighed. "The burden of a full day." "Yeah. Can you scan the descriptions in order of quickest route? I don't feel like going to all of them." "One moment." His muted silence signaled complete use of his processes. The only other sound on the road was the heavy engine of a distant airship. VVVVVVT boom. A phaser cannon was driving practice shots over one of many restricted zones across the desert. "See those ships, Tron? They're probably your older brothers and sisters," Red said, pointing at the massive black behemoths above. She spoke between deafening rips from the ship's cannons. Now paying attention to the whole sky, Red estimated hundreds of airships to be hovering over Vegas. Those ships were as unique as people. Some, besides being equipped with large weather-worn corporate logos, sported monstrous heavy arms, weapons add-ons, and were paired with intuitive computer ecosystems. Others were simple gunner ships probably 20 years old. Just about every type of airship and piece of ship tech was up there. Few able-bodied ships weren't in the sky above. Red could immediately point out the company ships. They were the biggest ones. Usually the newest ones. Large companies like Loyanova could afford to run the behemoth gunner ships. Their incredible manpower afforded them to stand at the head of the fleet and at the highest altitudes. It was both a relief and a burden to be front defense. Loyanova had been in the business long enough to be granted free rein and government recognition. Still, not even Loyanova could always withstand the forces of nature from beyond the atmosphere. The heavy artillery held most storms dominantly, but it wasn't a difficult prediction to assume that solid government backing had been a contributing factor. The war on the skies had intensified with every season, and the nation's codependence private sectors was becoming a matter of necessity. Behind Loyanova Head were true military forces. Air defense was needed everywhere when the storms came so naturally. Even in a large city like Vegas, it was spread thin. Hence, one of the reasons private companies were so vital was to bulk up the strength of the military forces in this losing fight. Alongside Loyanova, the other members of the Big Five could be found heading the defense against the debris storms, but few other corporations stood out as prominently as that big red-winged L. As the radius of ships moved lower, the formations loosened. Those were the militia ships. Anyone and everyone who had an able-bodied ship was almost certain to be aiding in the defense. Hence why it often looked like a floating junkyard. A militia ship ignited a phaser, obliterating a stray meteorite as it was replaced by a rain of dirt and lesser rock pieces. A shot worth 5 liters at least. No storm in sight yet, but probably a portent of one to come. People joined the militia to rack in liter rations of fusion core. Fusion was like liquid currency. People could trade it because right now it was the most stable currency on the planet, and they could use it when they ran low on energy resources. Killing asteroids paid well. Hitting average-sized ones would pay about 30 liters of fusion to militia. 55 if a government back made the kill. The reward gap was more of an incentive than an inequity, but 30 liters was still a hefty sum. The same list of 8 stops popped up on Tron's virtual screen, now isolating the results by quadrant and distance. Red unchecked the furthest ones and zeroed in on a random choice. As foreboding as the thought of hitting the whole list today was, she figured just starting on the first would give her momentum. She aimed her direction towards south, heading into what was one of the densest satellite city clusters in Vegas. The on-screen order form flashed on the screen. Red reread the data as if she weren't grasping an obvious detail somewhere in it. Name, William Oak, age, 62, occupation, rehabilitation specialist. Keynotes, placed an order for 5 cases. Received 4, 1 is damaged, 1 is missing. Will contact on Tuesday for update. Some other scribbles decorated the corner of the memo. A tiny drawing of a stick figure with a smiley face. Someone must have been bored that day. There wasn't much else to go by. Red called up the address on the note. A man answered, possibly William. He sounded younger than her perceived vision. Hi, yes. It's good to hear from you. I know it has to be a huge mistake. He was very apologetic. The shipment came in, but I'm afraid some are corrupt. Can we schedule you to come in? Of course. Red wasn't thrilled, but she didn't expect things to be incomplete. But later this week won't be good. I'm not sure what my schedule is going to look like. I will have some free time this week. Maybe I can inquire remotely. It might take a day or 2. Well, I was hoping for sooner. Will you stay in the area a while longer? I have today, she said calmly, eyes absorbing the horizon's mirage effect. Hey, maybe that's just fine. I'm free tonight. She did her best work at night. Something about the vibe of the night sky. I have nothing to do tonight. Red answered. So it's a yes then? Sure. How's 9? She made a mental note. 9 it is. Should I meet you? I'm at the Ridgeway Inn. 9 then. Here's my contact in case you forgot it. If you need any more details, let me know. Here he handed the info link. I'll see you tonight. Tonight. Feeling hungry, she stopped by a food wagon. What can I get you? The man up in the roach coach asked. Seeing him inside a virtual automobile oven made her feel better about the heat. A burger and some fries. Extra relish. Red chewed on the food as she paged through possible inventories. Not enough energy in the fuel cell to load everything she wanted. Stopping by a refuel station was a must, or she could trade for it while shopping. Red grabbed her order. A couple of people sat around rocks and on crates, finishing their quick bites. The midday sun seemed to be picking up, and these days the air didn't have a lick of moisture. But she knew it was ready to change any time. The wave of tiredness was relentless. Red had slept well the night before. Her neck was a bit sore and she sort of needed a shower. But that wasn't enough of a reason to check in just yet. After finishing her burger under the midday sun, the lethargy hit her hard. She would check into the EZ rest along the route. Red helped herself to an energy boost snack, knowing the static in her nerves would be all too temporary. In her bag were also her vitamins. A label-less container bought by a lady in a small local convenience store. A home remedy for fixing sleep irregularities. All the same, it was a quick, almost forgettable buy. Most people had a bottle somewhere, few wanted to explain to others what it was. Parasites, laziness, a mental condition. Nobody admitted to having trouble with it. But the remedy sold frequently, under the counter, or behind the contraceptions, undergoing constant reshelves and never advertised. Red went to look for water, heading for a vending machine that hummed near the back units. Quick as it came, she downed the much-needed hydration, popped a remedy and passed out again. Sleep. Before she knew it, the soft felt of the comforter ushered in welcoming warmth that was different from the heat that obtrusively crept through the cracks in the door and windows. 2 minutes inside the room and she was out. Dreams aplenty. She stepped out onto the self-manifesting flat rock tiles, stonework columns and half-broken arches laying themselves as the walkway faded into the outdoors, a wild grass hillside as the destination. Every time she came to this place it was sort of the same but always never an exact recreation. The textures were different perhaps. This time the hillsides looked out onto steep cliffs many hundreds of miles away, waterfalls dropped from every break in the rock. Pastel dandelions and ivory white flowerets lined the wildflower earth. She wasn't where she wanted to go yet. There must be the next portal somewhere. She saw a small rock wall divider. In between the tiny rocks were little pieces of paper interspersed. Built into the concrete crags. The design continued along the wall, the pieces multiplying, soon covering the whole thing. Even the ground began to sprout pulpy growths. A paper world. Ancient pieces of paper with archaically printed datasheets provided the building materials for shelter. The word bill was written on some. Queries for repairs, dashes and XD processors. Bill. She was supposed to search for something. Red's clumsy legs regained their balance as her slow movements were failing to keep up with the reproducing pathway along the endless black. Careful, the ground was giving way just slightly under her wobbly feet. She moved slow. It could be the nameless painkiller, a fresh bottle. Step lightly then she thought, hoping her ground wouldn't budge anymore. Around her paper wood paneling met paper floors and sprouted up into paper ceilings. Tiny bills sprouted up like the teensy dandelions, a paper reproduction of the wildflowers from the first room. The dandelion weeds grew incessantly now, cheerful tiny dots that began to overwhelm, break up the room's theme and blend the synthetic greenery into untamed avenues of paper worlds. She would have to escape now, remembering that only nightmares could be helped in places as unstable as these. The thought of searching for bills of any kind now felt like an intrusive thought. She didn't want to find him. Not now. In her pocket she felt for it. A little playing die she kept. It was a keepsake sort of. Originally from the Liana complex, the red glass die had been a token memory. So where should I go? She asked, shaking the keepsake. Perhaps Lady Luck knew the way, a potentially saving choice to avoid a nightmare. The cupped hand opened, revealing a 2 along the die's most upward side. Door 2 then? She searched for a door with a 2. Chance must have smiled upon her as she noticed exactly that, just to the left. I don't really have a reason to be going here, she thought. Would luck really give her a well-intentioned path? She decided intuition was an effective guide, and perhaps putting her faith in this decision could be sort of a test. To be safe, she stayed on the lookout for any other signs. Door number 2 it is. Red felt light inside, her own insecurity still as uneasy as the shifting tiles she walked on. She made her way inside. This room was typical for her. Red saw the endless black sky mix into patches of electric green lightning, the upcoming monsoon. The snakes of pure energy side-winded through the clouds. Deep violet scrapes of light etched into the sky as the multiplying snakes made their way through the sky. Red walked for a while, checking to see if her mobile was functional. She wasn't carrying it. Someone walked towards her. She hoped it was Dharma. No luck. Instead he was shorter and younger. He made no introduction, just came up to her. His slap bracelets were colorful and his star tattoo gave Red the hint she'd been looking for. His hair was done up, an overstated mohawk with a luxurious curvature courtesy of gravity and product. The shoes added an extra 3 inches to his height. With his complete look, he could pass for a whole foot taller. Probably less, but this was the land of illusion. "Calm the world down," the punk kid said. He pulled a cigarette from his front pocket and a lighter from behind his ear. "It's not easy," Red said. She should have been colder or more defensive, considering it was the twerp who stole her hat once. But the past was the past and he wasn't around friends. He handed her a cigarette. "Thanks. Why you here anyway?" "You needed me." The boy's response was immediate. "But you are Inko. I live here. You're in my house, remember?" "Oh," Red said nonchalantly. She remembered now. "I'm not sure how that works. This place is pretty sparse to be a house. It's a work in progress. I claimed it." "Nah. That's impossible." Red felt like she was arguing on all the wrong cues. He didn't even make sense. It was as if he was trying to be immature, or just going through the motions. A stream of consciousness or something like that. "Well, you know you're in a dream, right?" "Yeah, I figured that." The sky darkened with patches of cloud. "That's a weird name. Did you make it up?" Red asked. "Like this world, yeah, it's all my own. So you want to get off my land? I'm building a deathmatch stadium here." "Wow, you're really making one?" A hint of patronization crept into Red's voice. "Yeah. Here, have a flyer." He handed her a glossy advert. On the glossy black paper a swirl of high-contrast geometric shapes danced in chaotic flow. Double outlined words with rock metal lettering spelled out the name of the event, Hellbound. "You'll get free cover if you bring that," Inko said. He started to walk backward. Red suddenly felt like she was going to miss something if she let him walk away. She walked alongside him for a while. "Hey, where's the exit?" Red asked. She didn't really care for the answer, but he was about to disappear. "It's over there." He pointed in the opposite direction. "Well, where are you going?" "I told you, I'm building something." 8. "So how do you build it?" He shrugged. "Not sure. You just sort of pull up some walls and start making things." The empty space between his hands solidified, first small particles of faint matter strengthened into outlines and 3-dimensional shapes. Inko lackadaisically formed the shapes. Soon a bus-sized object stood before him. "Whoa. I need more red." The bus object was pale gray, but gradually it glowed with the new rosy hue. "That's my name," Red said, not sure if he meant the color or her. He didn't take notice for a second. Twerp. In hindsight, it shouldn't have surprised her that he didn't know her name, but Red was still contemplating if this world truly was Inko's dream and she was only a stranger here, or if he were the one intruding. The exit was easy to spot now. Red quietly slipped away, secretly manifesting a trail of little red blocks as she left. 9. Something in the air. "Why are you so interested in it?" the man at the counter asked. His name was Folio. He was a tall man, not particularly fat, a soft roundness about his extra weight that suggested his girth had been put on lovingly from many happy meals. His shop was dusty in appearance and surrounding him was wall to wall full of second-hand electronics. This could have been a pawn shop. Many patrons brought their digital belongings, pressed on difficult moments in life, or simply with little other need for them. so the shop functioned as a pawnbroker sometimes. But to Folio, his shop served more as a library. He collected and repaired the metal specimens as well as their contents, preserving them, protecting them. The man on the other side of the metal desk today was not a protector of any sort. Instead, he looked up at Folio with Cheshire grin. It's a classic. You won't even know how attached some people get to these things. Besides, you know me. Not that I'm saying anything, but we're going to be good friends if you buy this and many others from me. This Cheshire individual was one of those rare types, dressed in regalia that could confuse him for another type of man who feared and loathed far too often. He raided rare antiques and knew the stock catalogues well. You think I'll like it that much? Folio asked, a bit piqued. Well, I do. But I'm not supposed to tell you. He laughed, patting one of the glossy turquoise boxes. Besides, a working model this nice. It was just a digital air purifier. But damn. The history. Collectors scoured junkyards for the early models. The original ionotation crystals intact that could change a person's future if they landed on mint. Folio examined the box. This one was an early 2024 model that had been discontinued. Same make as the rare ones, but no crystal. Well, I've been told that a shipper is bringing in 5 more next week. But if he falls short on his promise, then I've got nothing. Folio said. And this color is beautiful too. See, how many aqua blue ones have you seen around? How much did you get paid for it? 450 plus tip. I'll give you 600 in cold hard credit today. No delay. Folio looked at his tablet, running a live feed of the smut gambling race in the background. Pole dances and blue chips, rows of numbers fluctuating across the screen. I still don't like you better than any of my other customers, but I need to move some wares around. Here, this can't hurt then. Blintz threw in a set of tickets. I'll do 9 with the passes to the lava room. Folio was too old to visit the Stardust room. He slid back the tickets, knowing full and well their value. Blintz tried not to feel hurt by the bargain. 600 is all I can do today, my friend. Oh, I'm not going to play hardball with you. Just keep the tickets, and if it's really worth the headache, I'll take 620. I have another stopover in Mesquite today that trades easy. But really, Folio, I want you to have it. And how long have we known each other? You can't letting me leave without making business with you? A dark grin rose in Folio's laugh lines. Well, okay then. Let's shake on it. I have to grab some food before I pass out in this armlet fryer. With those words, Blintz was out the door. The shutters on the hackneyed windows rattled. The speedy Blintz was already hopping into his car, making dust clouds. Folio laughed at himself, looking at the Stardust tickets and at the cracked air filter. It looked just like any other from the line. He flipped it on. The old motor hummed quietly, a minuscule scattering of dust particles floated out of the fan. There was a crystal inside. The cubic-looking rock wasn't the original. A fragment of crystal mined off of the mineral buildup along from the fallen satellites. It worked just the same, but changed the device from a rare find to just a refurbish. The mark of authenticity. What a strange world. Folio laughed. He took a pair of microscope goggles and peered inside the grate. Who knew these things could be so rare? He checked the metal lining, finding the little magnets, apparently commonplace in these types of devices. They were original. Blintz, what a guy. The ZX Seabreezes were originally made as an air purification system for a polluted world. They were made by Healthy Living Inc., a family company. During the new era, people looked for portable comforts, devices to weed out the pollution that deteriorated their modern lives. Healthy Living originally developed green products. Home appliances mostly. Starting with portable speakers, the line soon expanded into radios, blenders, even computers with eco-friendly circuit boards and recyclable transistors. The lineup grew to over 500 different pieces of household comforts. Early products had the conscience at heart, but didn't deliver on quality until 5 years later when the business took off. Still, there was the charm of stylish shapes and colors. Most of the products came abroad, utilizing untapped natural plant extracts instead of crude oil to make their plastics. Otherwise, Healthy Living had been just one of thousands of other companies out there. The ZX air filters were fairly run-of-the-mill in the 7-year history of products. But in Forleo's hand was one of the special rarities. This air purifier was called the ZX Seabreeze 20i. Not only did it clean the air, but rumor spread that through some anomaly of human engineering, people were able to use it to speak to the dead. Modern science went into a frenzy for months when the stories flooded in about possessed air purifiers. Housewives were running wild, claiming there were voices in the house. Did you buy a Seabreeze? Yep, ghosts is probably it. The yellow tabloids broke loose. At first, the stories didn't come out as very credible. The headlines looked about right next to Martian abduction scandals and satanic cult love triangles. Jellyfish girl birthed after mother swam in polluted lake was on the adjacent page of the first story, titled My air conditioner claims to be my grandmother. But then a small college study broke the credibility barrier. Undiscovered parametric array may explain ghostly tales with climate control units. Then another health group, the Holistic Safety Bureau, invested solid credit into investigating the plausible hauntings. Immediately before the Bureau could release the study, the Seabreezes were being recalled overnight. Still, this seemed pretty normal for Healthy Living. Their cheap foreign goods were always being experimentally manufactured with poisonous materials. A type of rubber tree had grown with a cytotoxin that was detrimental to infant development, or bolts were improperly engineered. But demand for ZX Seabreeze 20i didn't die off just yet. Large private buyers with corporate accounts had set up large orders for all the while a newly designed Seabreeze 20i was placed on the market. There were subtle differences, but for the most part indecipherable. Rumors of hauntings still remained as fodder for wacky magazine stories, but upon closer inspection of the newer Seabreezes, the results were found inconclusive. In a statement to the public, the Police Commissioner of California made an eloquent speech on the matter. Her words were spaced out, removing any charge from her meaning as she addressed the recall, now including a buyback program and newly imposed right to seizure of any potentially faulty ZX appliances. We care about our citizens' safety. The recent influx of these appliances on the consumer market were made with materials not safe for domestic settings. It is vital and imperative that we protect our citizens from being exposed to toxic damage. The program was successful as tens of thousands of ZX Seabreeze 20s had been taken in. There were may more, but for the most part only a few people knew or cared to take note of a ridiculous air filter recall. And that seemed like the end of things. Except it wasn't. Meanwhile, a small electronics ratings website ran a story about the risks and implications of the ZX Seabreeze 20i. The story's writer found it troubling to go through with disposing such a great little gadget for what seemed to be inconclusive reasons. The website hnet.com was relatively well reviewed and its journalist was on equally credible terms. Needless to say, the article kicked up some dust. In the article, the writer, Stan Limrich, had proposed that he was willing to risk keeping his Seabreeze 20i because he could not find any real danger with the product. Upon going over the reasons for the recall, Stan found that his air filter didn't possess any of the harmful materials described in the recall notice. The glossy polish finish did not chip. And even after sending samples of fragments he chipped himself to a friend who worked in a lab, he received result that there were no signs of toxic paint or a lead-infused body. His ZX Seabreeze 20i complied with every health and safety regulation and seemed to refute every troubling bullet point on the recall. Over the next few weeks, Stan got in touch with Healthy Living Inc. as well as Family Safety Group, the health organization that had initiated the health warning. In a series of roundabout speculations, Healthy Living explained that not all of the Seabreezes were made with the same shipment of contaminated resources and he was one of the lucky ones, but they were not willing to take risks and had to recall all of them. This all sounded fine and well, but Stan had been under the impression that all of the Seabreeze 20s were health risks. He wanted to know why there was such huge pressure to recoup all of the Seabreeze 20s, both on the market and especially on the ones already purchased. In his arsenal of knowledge, Stan Limerick knew that people were being personally contacted, even court-mandated to return their product for a full refund. His was stored at a remote location. After many tedious legal threats, Stan's ZX also had to be confiscated. The question only weighed on him more as he was piqued that something was odd about the whole ordeal. Sometime later, Stan got phone calls from a Healthy Living representative asking that he unpublish his slanderous article. More bells went off in Stan's mind. How was an article, nearly a cookie-cutter clone of many other net articles, a slanderous act? Surely if his story were true, then Healthy Living should be ecstatic. It would undo all sorts of expensive capital losses, now that the recall was found to be a mistake. And Healthy Living could make saves by refuting all that bad press. But the representative remained firm. It is against our company's integrity that your article is harming. We are a well-respected group that does not tolerate false accusations. But it's not a false accusation. I couldn't find anything wrong with the sea breezes that I've found. There's no chemicals present in any of them, and I haven't found any that have posed an actual threat to anyone's safety. Mr. Limerick, please. Why would we be recalling our own products if there wasn't a need? I have to say your review is off base and you are going to hurt your reputation if you keep it up. We are a credible company ourselves, and surely you understand where I'm coming from. Remove your review or be prepared to sign some unwanted papers. He wouldn't press the issue. The story was removed from the hnet.com site and Stan continued to review products for years after. But Mr. Limerick's speculative story stayed known in the underground. So did the rumors that otherworldly voices could be heard through their fans. 50 years later, very few people knew the history of those junky machines. Folio eyed the ivory polish of the corroding home appliance. This was an early model of the ZX. He could tell because inside the hinged catch were tiny unimportant magnet ball bearings that had been mistaken for the ordinary iron type. They glistened with an unattractive grey matte coat. Unimportant to the naked eye. Folio used the edge of his fingernail to dig into the grey coat, unearthing a vaguely darker grey, barely sparkling with jade shimmer. Still hardly unordinary looking, but certainly not the usual magnetic ball bearings used. The motor clicked jerkily, half ready to choke out. Yep, this one was a winner. 10. The Independent Cat. Red was always bothered by an endless sea of problems. Besides being too short, too not pretty, too slow, too tan, too athletic, she was also not clever enough, not pure enough, not kind enough. She fought day in and day out to battle doubt as it reliably crept in with new points of argument. But she was done today. Those tiresome thoughts would fall away as soon as she would dive into the sleep ahead. Inside her mind, Red was safely hidden beneath that harsh city of thoughts and ideas, wayward traffic jams of urgent matters, short-term memories and fears that grew like skyscrapers. She could see it before her, but not within. This was her mind, manifesting on its own, free of her responsibility to conduct it from the driver's seat. Now the thoughts dispersed about the consciousness city like cars and buses weaving through the busy downtown. Passengers neither bothered nor cared to think about their day's events. Red's last hovering thoughts moved away from her like train cars passing out of the stations, out and away. She blinked. Reality turned into a vivid life-like cartoon world. What did she want to dream about this time? The ceiling, like the one she saw while awake, was now changing. The spackled pattern moved with the shadows it cast, deep grooves etched into the appearing sky by inches then feet and miles. As she looked over to her side, the motel window was changed into archways presenting a view of a vast ocean. She peered out onto the lush turquoise waters, catching glimpses of ant-sized mausoleums beneath the horizon. Their undiscovered chambers were sure to be bathed in intricate ceramic work against and golden gilded borders, all the way up and through those ever-expanding cavernous rooms and hallways. She floated through the windows into the sea. The night air welcomed her now, brushing soft breaths of cold wind against her cheeks. She floated, following a warm current as she was guided into what seemed to be an invisible highway. Red drifted faster now, keeping close to the warm updraft, going where her thoughts wished her to be. She thought of a brochure from her memory. Was it Thailand or Nepal that called to her? She envisioned the huge bosoming rocks carved with daintily pointed feet and standing taller than the trees. There was the mainland, cold, crashing waves onto the black sand. She went further inland, reaching temples as large as the gods themselves, carved from a single mountainous stone, hidden beneath rich palm forests and dense black rock. Red kept going, eager to fill the corners of her eyes with more of these fantastic sights. Every stretch of unseen land on the planet was reachable with her will. She wanted to see camels share patches of grass with yaks and kids laughing as they threw flowers at each other just before lunchtime. She wanted to walk onto shallow tide pools of the Norse countryside, carrying a sack of triangle-cut sandwiches and bottles of homebrewed sweet tea. She looked out onto the painted New Hampshire plains. Closing her dreaming eyes, Red felt her feet grow heavy. She had reached the place her heart chose. The Earth's rotation slowed beneath her until a distorted influx of all the visuals she had just taken in faded away and aligned. She landed slowly down through wisps of cloud. Here now Red realized she had grown just a tad more conscious. Her memory of the day depressingly came back in slowly, but still not completely. She could still remember the lighter-than-air sensation of floating across the earth. Now Red glowed with a desire for change. Her waking life and the one she could see herself leading, they coexisted here, showing road signs of possibility to her. She remembered going to a market for water. Red could see it again, just as clear as she remembered, but at the same time it was different. From a higher angle perhaps, or was she looking at it from another day? There was that same aisle 11. Empty at the time, but here she was aware that just hours before, a lone babushka had spent 6 minutes choosing the right brand of flour. Or was this encounter days, even weeks before? Had this been the babushka's shopping trip before the last? She was wearing a Sunday dress. But it was a weekday, wasn't it? Red concentrated, but lost her awareness. The world melded. Those perforated market shelves turned to liquid metal, pooling into river beds like unnatural lakes made of cereal box labels and cooking oil ripples. Bran flakes dripped into lily pads, splashes of lemon bags bobbed along the surface, all intertwined. The unconcerned shelving associate had turned now into a mountain. The bags under her eyes acquired from late hours were leaking stardust now as they blew clouds along the larger-than-life conveyor belt that now stretched long and far like farmland plots of earth. This was the way for her to go. She saw it just ahead. The same familiar grassy knoll she'd remembered. A place she'd maybe invented because she had never been there physically, but again and again Red imagined it often. There were no shoes on her feet now, only barefoot touching the fresh wild grass. Tiny buttons of wildflower sprouted everywhere. "Look over there," a voice said, pointing out towards the atmospheric haze in the distance. From where he pointed, a distant city rose from the brilliant white ocean of thick cloud, save for this small island where Red and this guy stood. His name was Dharma. She had met him before, just as she had been to this island before. He stood beside her against a whimsically grown knot of tree stumps and green growths. The imposing size made him seem smaller than he really was, though already Dharma was on the petite side of average stature. Beside him a kitten slept peacefully curled into a ball. Its purr rumbled in unison with the flow of cloud cover. "I wonder what he's thinking about," Red said. "Oh, he's dreaming about our world, I bet. Walking like a tiger, mending the damaged pipes and broken machines of human ineptitude, naturally. What's his name?" "Muriel." "Oh, is she yours?" "I'd like to think so. I never asked. It might be rude of me to, but we'll see when she makes up her mind. She just found me today. How's your bruise?" "Bruise?" Red asked, perplexed. "The one on your shin," Dharma said. His hand waved over the spot near Red's leg calf. There was no discoloration, but she suddenly knew the mark he was talking about. It happened that day. A careless maneuver on her part. She'd sent her leg smack into the side of her bike's tailpipe while mounting. It made for a mean 3-inch patch of purple. But now, in this dream, Red didn't think anyone would see or care to know. "Here," Dharma said as he tossed her a small thermos. The fragrance of jasmine and mint wafted in. "Thank you. It's good for you." Red took a deep sip. The taste was just as fresh as it smelled and filled her body with warmth. A dream indeed. She felt herself relax inside, feeling better than she had for the past weeks. Dharma stood up, stretching his arms. "Well, I think you have a call. Better take it then." "Oh, what?" The panic-stricken urgency came full effect as the faint beep trickled in louder with each chirp. She looked around the grass field. Just silent swaying flowers among reeds of grass. The beep chirped louder, eating away at the dream. White noise and jarring distortions again chirp, this time stretching the sounds out, joined in by impulsive white light from all directions that only intensified with every elongated moment. She could almost see the Navajo-patterned bed lining of the motel room now. Still it mixed in against a painfully synesthetic sound of her mobile. The hillside faded nearly completely now, her world feeling more like the vibrating tracks of a passing freight train. Then she awoke. Like two scenes in a movie brutishly cut together, she saw her world. No soundtrack, no blink from her own eyelids to separate the change. She simply was awake. 11. Coffee shop dreams. Had it been that many hours? The mobile was sounding its announcement. Red's body stiffened in retaliation against the offensive noise. On the mobile a message came. Its sender, a client who was regularly short on details. Red hardly remembered what they talked about. The conversation had been brief and on her part, spoken through drunken words. She vaguely remembered being on the phone as her eyelids lost momentum. Even now, Red could barely focus. She reread the first line. "I'm looking forward to our meeting." Red's mind wasn't following. Instead she focused on coaxing herself out of bed and though of grabbing breakfast from somewhere quick. Today felt like a phenomenal day to go downtown and just do nothing for a change. She would hold off on the current dash orders just long enough to freshen her mood. The arcade would be open. It usually cheered her up to go there. An hour and a half later, Red was in Old Town. Liana, the arcade complex, hid underneath a sampling of the city construction that was staggered about the city. With constant debris storms and national defenses perpetually underprepared, the skyline stayed abundant in disrepair. Old Town didn't fare much better than her more affluent neighbors, but still lay shrouded in boarded partitions and protective tarps. Liana was originally built as a modern French Gothic atrium, with glass-paned greenhouse ceilings and romantic black iron arches. Time and progress had sandwiched her luxurious frame beneath sleazy stacks of Rubik's Cube structures, glitz and glamour at its most chrome. Inside her walls the stagnant air of a forgotten gambler's paradise sported expensive carpets and cornices desperate for refurbishment. Relic slot machines filled the desolate rooms, stacked 10 high. It was a literal storage heap of ancient technology. But now it seemed this place would be better to sell the metal for scrap iron. Inside half of the dim-lit grand ballrooms were more rows of rusted chrome, more and more one-armed bandits piled far, reflecting fragments of multicolored candy glass with what little light streamed through the dusted window paneling. Red imagined these rooms to be reminiscent of the wreckage on the street corners, only protected from the winds by these ancient walls. She could almost hear the machines working, ghosts pulling winnings from the tin basin plates. But it had been a while since the glimmer of those hopeful winnings sparked the human spirit here in this world. A troubled woman spoke to herself near a covered shelter stop by the sandblasted plaza on the way to Liana. She asked some ghostly apparition a question. It seemed to be granting her answers and she continued to inquire further. Yes, I know. They took it. They don't you know? The woman held dearly to a scribbled pamphlet. A man lighting a cigarette on the street corner eyed Red as she passed the woman. The woman pushed the pamphlet in Red's face. Do you know this place? A caricatured Elvis pointed awkwardly at a museum entrance beneath a gaudy purple headline that read "See It." The scribbles were barely readable and destroyed most of the clarity that the pamphlet once held. I think the Elvis Museum is down that block. Red pointed along the side street. The scattered woman paused breathlessly. You're helping me? Her eyes quivered with confused sadness, having previously only found rejection and sinister remarks. The man with the cigarette broke the moment, his roll of herb obtrusively flicked closer to the women, followed by his foot incredulously stamping out the light. The next block over was Liana. Red could already see the girls running around excitedly throwing shouts at each other from behind the deeply opal windows. A girl guarding the door sipped on a bottle. Reason for visit, Missy? Her words were to the point, yet apathetic. The girl wore a strong combination of studded leather and metal black bands. Not common wear at this time of day, but this was Liana after all. Just visiting, Red said, nonchalantly. The girl gave a more interested of course, as she offered her ornate flask to Red. The girls usually knew each other by face. The girl at the door looked comfortable enough for Red to assume she had been there a while already. Red had been gone that long. Red drank a small cap with both hands. The cool fruit fermentation heated her stomach as the bouncer warmly motioned for her to come inside. Heat's coming in, so hop in quick, she added. Red stepped onto the moldy red carpet. The old electrical and peeling walls, still functional. This place could have been a haunted mansion. Catch me, a spirited girl in full gown and tall hair shouted. She was playing tag with an elk of all creatures and two other maidens. The smallest one caught her foot inside the fountain. Splash! They giggled uncontrollably. On the center stairwell another group braided each other's hair as they spoke in free tongue. The brunette walked down and greeted a gentleman. Long time, he said. Yap. Just call me love, she replied. With a fluid movement, he offered his hand and they walked. From noticing the other girls, Red paid more attention to her own steps, clumsy-footed trots compared to the others. Compared to her, they were maidens who floated around on golden waves. Red's boots thundered against the cavernous walls. She felt her neck crooked and her shoulders jagged. She was embarrassed of her thighs. In a series of unglamorous changes, she shifted her walk. First she clattered jerkily with little improvement in confidence and finally set on a jerky gazelle walk. The warmth of the liquor eased her mind. A strapless Savannah did her best to ravage a duet on the baby grand piano, turning it into a funny melody with quirky parts where her partner hokily tried to play off-key. Liana's halls were vast. Originally it had been one of the larger casinos around. Sprawling shopping corridors. The halls seemed to be endless. Red passed another fountain, albeit this one dry with a broken Venus. On the high sandstone walls perched windows that could not see out of ground level. Instead only skyscrapers and the sky above could be seen from those out-of-reach portals. Through the windows Red could see scattered ships lazily weaved around one. Maybe the next debris shower won't be so bad, Red thought. She had slept through the one that happened the night before. Haha, no touching there, one of the girls yelled. An energetic older man wearing a sharp blazer with elbow patches and kerchief pockets was hard-pressed to keep his hands off of the girl. Let's meet at the cantina, he said. Car, she yelled as she drifted out of the hallway. Liana remained open in spite of the fact that nobody knew of its owner's whereabouts. As far as the books were concerned, someone named Athena Clark held the papers and never missed a mortgage payment. She was apparently a very active person all over town as well. Athena regularly updated a wallpaper page, posting photos, comments, little blurbs about her everyday life. But it seemed she was a being with no face. Her timestamps and the actual time where she was supposed to be were always at odds, and it seemed that anyone trying to find her through social network clues alone had always just missed her. And many people did cyber stalk her. Liana was one of the top 80 most valuable pieces of property in the Vegas region. Not to mention this Athena Clark owned a rumored 0.25% of the world's unmarked digital currency. She was quite an interesting person indeed. Judging from her blogs, she had just eaten at the sleaziest burger joint on the strip. The word delish was scribed next to a glazed statue figure of the iconic badass fat boy. Red, a hopeful voice piped up from behind. His spectacles, some sort of functional steampunk accessory most likely for show. A thick volumed novel lay in his hand's grip. To match, atop his tall thin frame were worn brown loafers. Red turned around, greeted by a glowing face. I was hoping you'd come. The smile that uttered those words, Red could swim in it. Yeah. I needed a visit. Me too. Place is still standing. Ha, yeah. Still standing. Red replied. They stood in momentary silence. Hey, I built my own dash. It's in my room. Do you want to see it? Took some electrical engineering courses. Flit, that's great. Of course I do. I'm staying on the other side of the expressway. You know Little Budapest? I know some guys. They scouted a temporary situation. It's a bit cozy right now, but they're good company. And there's an Enzo bar on the same floor too. Come, I'm going back there right now. Oh, you know. Great, I'll go wait for you there. Don't stick me up or I'll be waiting and very lonely, so very lonely. He made a puppy dog face. Fuck his charm. Red started to break in a smile. As much as she wanted to distract herself with yet another activity, Red decided against it. I'll see you, Flit. I have to go do something. Do you want to grab a drink with me before though? He smiled, took her hand as they went down to the cantina. You still like rum? She glanced at his cheekbones, now nearly rising to the top of his ears. Yes. Bartender, 2 Adna Sundays, Flit said, tossing a long lock of hair out of his eyes. I'm so glad you came in town. Your friends are back too. Red didn't want to say anything. She knew and he knew. Flit changed the topic. Some of the boys got a full EP out. They're playing it at the Sienna. The 2 alcohol-infused soda floats arrived. A layer of sherry cherries and glaze floated thick over carbonated rum cream. You want to come? Tuesday night. We're all going. I still need a wingman. You in? I have work. No. He grabbed her arm. But I love you. Flee it. Again she had to face that irresistible smile. Red turned away before it did more damage. Come, you can spare a day. Give me a few hours. You won't regret it. Red could see nothing but earnest want in Flit's face. The charm of his words combined with the rum soda float. Red was having a hard time wrestling with her perception of what would be comfort tonight. She gave in. Okay. Tonight. We go out. Ah, my body fills with happiness now. It's formal causal. They've got a speakeasy theme going on, but anything goes really. When we get around there, won't be any mistaking who's got it on. Now, how about another round? Bartender. 12. Trapped. Red knew she was late for something. She patted her sides, looking for her mobile comm device. No sign of it. She felt her keys, her wallet, a small receipt. She was still at Liana, the heart of Old Town, sitting on a long velvet sofa in the center of a very long hallway. Oh yeah, I'd left it at the room. Red now remembered Flit and the rum floats hitting her. She sat up feeling strangely uneased. The way this place looked was reminiscent of something very unreal. It must be. Everything around Red very likely was an illusion. She'd had that same feeling before. Up above her head, the swaying velvet curtain looked much newer and the floor tiles seemed to be slightly different shades of the same chocolate tan and royal black. And those monochromatic Renaissance pixel murals seemed to be moving. Already Red was forgetting her sense of urgency here. She began to explore the new Liana. She had to be dreaming. Walking through Liana now opened Red up to new possibilities. She could already feel the life coursing through these unkempt hallways. The walls were expressive, able to tell stories of why they were in disrepair. The story of this place's existence unfolded. Red toyed with the long cracks along the corridor walls. Liana had begun as a young casino, promising hot-shot gamblers immeasurable wealth. The walls rained in ancient dollar bills. As Red continued along, she found the aging walls collide with redone layers of peeling paint and stucco. The story grew much more threatening as Liana bowed under the pressure of 60 stories of newer reinforced steel over top of her cantilevered ceilings. Especially now that the lackadaisical girls were nowhere to be seen, Red was face to face with only Liana. The parlors were silent as night. No one waiting around or swaying about the corridors could distract Liana's voice from speaking in haunting noises. Not wanting to be haunted by the old building any longer, Red found the front entrance and made her way outside. Bleak night waited outside. Thick fog ate most visibility, changing the world into a much darker place. Even without being able to see through the air, Red could guess these streets would be as empty of life as Liana. But to her surprise, one person walked about. Just at the next intersection, a woman paced emotionlessly. Ghastly shadows streamed down her face, lit by not moonlight but by the faint glow of neighboring buildings. Her hair appeared oily, tangled, and her clothes disheveled. Everything about her lacked symmetry. "Do you need help?" Red asked. The woman looked up from her preciously clutched mobile, her eyes eagerly searching Red's own. Her face welled with pain behind matted lashes and sullen cheeks. Even in this imaginary world, Red could empathize this woman's shaken confidence. "This is not a good day," she muttered. Oh no, she was on the verge of tears. "It's not tomorrow yet, is it?" the woman asked, fighting back her defeated voice. No, it's not," Red said, unsure herself if midnight had passed. I think I'm stuck here," she cried. "How long have you been here?" Red asked, now grasping that this wasn't the real world. 3 weeks, I think." Red tried to comprehend the thought. "Do you know my husband? Bernard Estelle?" The woman's whole attention stayed buried in the backlit screen of her mobile. "I don't." "Hey, listen," Red said, mustering as much extra enthusiasm as she could. "How'd you get stuck?" I can't wake up." The woman looked through Red with strained eyes, needy and full of anxiety. Red remembered her own similar experiences. It was a nightmare, to fall asleep and not wake up for longer than a few hours extra. The dreams, she slowly became more conscious during her dreams as the trapped sleeps grew in frequency. She had been trapped for almost 3 days once. The unending dreams, they would move along like any other until she fell tired in her dreams. Then the nightmares came. Sometimes like giants crushing her worlds or like other worlds swallowing her giants. The nightmares came in many ways, but one certainty was when they would arrive, always when she was stressed. They would end when she found balance. Maintaining equilibrium in her dream world was like falling through the center of the earth. It was frightening at first, but then she got used to the drop. By then she would have reached the other side of the earth, realize the direction of gravity, and continue to fall in the new frightening direction into another nightmare. Red started taking the pills when the hours stretched into days. They helped her wake when the sleeps got long. 3 weeks though. This woman must be terrified. "Can I get you a coffee, water, or something?" Red asked. Coffee? Was there even a place around here? The woman looked up the avenue. Clothing outlets, stationery shops, and coffee houses solidified in prominence behind the darkness of fog. Their colorful awnings and signs stood proudly. The world was as it always had been, but all the same, it had changed. The woman's nervous grip loosened. She wasn't alone for the time being, and her nightmare calmed slightly. Here there were palm trees now, brilliant looming things. "Yes, thank you. A coffee would be great." Red didn't know this place too well. She wasn't familiar with outdoor malls or other shopping locales. But this place put the woman at ease. Red wondered if offering this woman a dreamed-up representation of her own waking pills might have any effect. Possibly it would do no help since the pills weren't real in the physical sense. A bottle of the back alley miracle medicine sat in Red's bag. "Here," Red said. She handed a hand full of the small capsules. "They might help you wake up." The woman took them with a silent thank you. She swallowed one and placed the rest in her pocket. Red could see her tired eyes heavy with tears ready to fall. The coffee shop was just before them. Red motioned for the woman to sit down at one of the outdoor tables. "Here is good?" Red asked. She sat solemnly, too pained to answer. Red looked upwards at the sky. Monsoon clouds were building. How long would it be before the storm kicked in? Red guessed half an hour. "I don't know what to do. It's gotten worse," the woman said. "Last time it was a week. Now it's going on 3. What if next time I never." She lowered her heavy eyes. "My name is Esna. I am not married anymore. But my husband, he is a scientist. He knows I am here. Last time he kept calling me. I couldn't answer but he never stopped calling. So I ran towards his voice. I couldn't reach him this time." "How did you fall asleep?" Red asked. Esna looked only at her phone. "Have you tried to find another phone? To call him maybe?" "Yes. I looked. I can't find one that works. I think the mobiles are all broken. Here, this is mine. Esna showed her phone. The little atom icon showed no rings, meaning service was non-existent. Do you have one? Red pulled at her side bag. Yes, the mobile was there now. Here, Red placed it in Esna's hands. She took the mobile appreciatively. Thunder boomed. Red looked around. In front of her, 2 coffee cups sat neatly next to a partially eaten plate of biscotti atop little round napkins and jars of honey. The coffee was cooling as if it had been set in front of them for some time now. The sky darkened. It's not working, Esna said, handing the mobile back. Red looked at the screen. The atom icon was spinning, meaning it was receiving service. Wait, it is working though, Red said, ready to hand back the mobile device. A sharp crack of green lightning beamed down to earth. Thunder followed, sending a hollow bang across the static air. The noise was deafening. Green threads of light seeped along the skyline, originating from where the green lightning first appeared. The night air filled with thousands of strandles of light like a hastily drawn web. Everything seemed to be swallowed by the intense green hue. Even Red's view of Esna was being swallowed. Esna looked at Red with frozen eyes. A blank stare. The coffee shop too had frozen. Red could see the coffee shop awning now perfectly still, while appearing to be swaying mid-breeze. The whole world had halted, and then shrunk away into black emptiness to Red's mind. She awoke. Gradually Red's vision came back, replacing the dark abyss with the velvet sofa she had originally fallen asleep on. The rest of Liana came back into focus. Red could see the light of the twilight city bathing its rainbow assortment of colors over the quietly empty hallways and tinted window panes. Flit. Red jumped up, remembering her promise. Quickly she hurried back to her room to get ready. 13. Night out. Flit and his posse stood outside an old theater facade looking like dapper dans. The boys sported bowler caps, vest pieces, pinstripe pants, the works. One of them checked his novelty pocket watch and kept going. I look at the time. Accompanying them were 2 girls in a la mode makeup who chatted busily. Everyone was done up to the theme of throwback speakeasy. The girl on the left appeared bored as she ranted about a bustier she had to return because a mismatched tag. The other listened half intently as she posed for another selfie. She wore multicolored high flats and hair swooshed in flyaway bangs of the same rainbow. Red jogged quickly, having already made everyone wait long enough on her. She thought how she must look compared to the group. She was dressed in bare minimal evening attire, having little time to plan. A one-piece shoulderless, with dangerous heels. Her dress, a matte black 3/4 cut, paled in comparison to the rainbow of color radiating from the girls. But as soon as Flit saw Red, he dropped everything. He smiled helplessly, staring. "You look fucking hot," he said. The compliment made Red blush. She didn't mind being out of theme anymore. "Been waiting long?" Red asked. "Nah, just got here. You're gonna flip when you see what's inside." He motioned to the group. "Guys, this is Red." The girls squinted out a smile and the guys gave brutish hellos. Red gave a nervous smile as she shook their hands. The desert afternoon had sunburnt her face, giving her cheeks the color of an 80s sunset. Still dazed from rum. The avenue tonight lit up beyond compare. Neons and fluorescents overloaded the dark night with vibrancy. Flit motioned for everyone to start their way in. Already upon entering, Red's eyes began playing tricks. Atmospheric fog lamps warped the scene. Red's eyes had trouble adjusting and the ground seemed to bow under her. Inside was a wave of body heat. The humidity hit her hard. Light strobes and digital pyrotechnics combated above the crowd. The music could be felt vibrating every cell in Red's body. Wild dancers held their glasses high. Were those dreams just a way to pass the time, Red wondered. The fresh patchwork memories didn't feel like they should be connected or given a second thought. Even amidst this beautiful chaos, it was hard for Red to think about much else. It was just a dream, after all. A senseless organization of forgettable details working itself into a story. Her thoughts came to just as a train of feathered girls tripped through, giggling and waving sequined gloves as they passed. The rest of the night went fast. Between shots of alcohol, struggling to claim a service table, plowing out onto the dance floor, recovering one of the girl's heels, recovered one of the guy's wallet, losing a cab or two, Red remembered having a good time. She heard maybe 3 words clearly that night. Flit was smiling for most of it. 14. In the old world. Earth was a travesty after the internet came full circle. Every literal digital inch of the Earth's surface, that's 12,478,143,744,000 square inches, could be connected, downloaded, uploaded, and pinged. Name it, the digital soul could transpire all across the entire globe. When it happened, that was when electricity completed its circuit. Nobody was prepared for the spark that followed. Like a radiant blue light that they were in the center of, their technological world was revealed to them in a way they could physically see. People looked upward and outward from their planet. They had been filled with an electric sensation that shook their nerves. It was raw, pure, and frightening. People hesitated to look upward and told themselves any number of excuses why they suddenly had things to do. A philosopher tried to put into words the feelings of bliss or bewilderment that he felt after that moment of completion. At the exact moment of his publishing the poem, 11 other poets had published the same poem nearly word for word. It was like some instantaneous burst of consciousness that everyone realized. They all felt some exact same feeling, a cacophony of a single unified thought. Just one thought. Perhaps it was a very universal idea, a near meaningless one like the all 8 billion people across the planet had all thought there at the very same moment. Their union of consciousness was so precise right down to the quark second that it had to not be a coincidence, and that was when people began to fear looking upward and outward. They revolted from it. Many people could not accept that everyone had thought the exact same thought at the exact same time. They were individuals, unique, mobile of their own accord. But when they looked to the sky, it seemed like ignoring it would be a safer thing to do. What happened to the world after that? The ozone corroded. That permeable shell of protection had been attacked, taken over and destroyed by particles of settling space dust circling the solar system. Crystallized mineral deposits and thick profusions of various noble gases seeped through the weakened atmosphere and settled onto the dry lands across Earth. From those crystal deposits, corrosive air blew in like storms. They were less frequent at first, but always increasing in ferocity every season. Scientists believed the gas concentration had come from a meteor cluster labeled 15-603 on the Milky Way atlas of moving paths and trajectories. It made sense. This was the first time in about 18,000 years that 15-603 and Earth had crossed paths. The effects were observable and dire. But how did it appear so quickly and change the landscape so quickly was beyond anyone's guess. It was harder to breathe now. Was it the sun killing people off the planet? Skin cancer? The world needed to protect itself against the now intensifying problem that had beamed down on Earthlings under a now harsher red light. At first it was simply called the skin cancer epidemic, a freak accident of the global polluting type. People could understand this. The storms came from a weakened ozone layer, the inevitable result of their own ecological laziness and social irresponsibility. People learned to endure frequently rising acid rainstorms and brutal summers that gave nothing but more poison storms. Their own lackadaisical sloth had become both a defense mechanism as well as an increasingly more deadly enemy. Pollution had gotten out of hand. It was either look at the influx of red storm and accept the dangers of its destruction, or look beyond it at the horrifying blue that shook them to the core. The environmentalists rejoiced at the media hype as donations poured in by the shiploads. Eco-friendly conservation efforts and restoration projects were being pushed like wildfire. But had it been too late by then? And then? August 11, 2045. Arnold Somovich, a Ukrainian student at a small technical arts college, had found a way to repel a mysteriously harsh wavelength of irregular light. He called it a xenium graphite crystal, named after the device's physical qualities. The crystal had very unique radiation values that simultaneously gave off very irregular magnetic fields. To look at a xenium graphite crystal from any side, one would see a small dull rock injected with electrical current rendering it colorful. The current shone blue, like a serene mix between sky aqua and deep space ultramarine. An odd side effect of the chemical reaction happened to be that whatever light radiated along the crystal's area of effect was bathed in a strange anti-light halo. So far it appeared to only be as harmful as darkness itself. But it was still a strange phenomena that was only beginning to be understood. People regarded the crystal as a beautiful angel that dazzled everyone who saw it. But beauty wasn't this little device's purpose. When turned on, the crystal would actively emit radio waves at a frequency that perfectly and oppositely repelled an exact inverse wavelength of the irregular wavelength of light he had been studying. As he dove into it more, Somovich learned that the irregular wavelength was more common in the atmosphere than he had imagined. That harsh red light from the sky seemed to be that irregular wavelength. And that it how Arnold Somovich had discovered the reason for the world's demise, as well as its cure. The xenium crystal was put into mass production almost immediately. "We have skin cancer's cure," people said. Word spread that this was the innovation the medical industry needed. Vegas was the first city to take upon a city-wide building project, installing Arnold Somovich's inventions en masse. Halstead Clark, the governor of Vegas, proposed the xenium graphite crystals be installed at all major level city quadrants. People would be able to walk outside without risking their health. The crystals were like protective force fields, godsends in these times. One medium-sized generator was able to cover a city block radius. But was it too late? Most other cities had been slow to respond to the health crisis, failing to do anything but advocate the use of umbrellas and hats. Their own turmoil was too deep in collapsing economies to promote xenium building projects. There was an urgency to protect in these places, but the world had its hands full. Private individuals could buy the crystals. They came not only as stationary generators, but also as portable devices. If one wanted to travel safely, they needed a xenium crystal. Powered by a simple solar energy generator at its base, they could be installed in vehicles, or attached as keychains. It was such a simple device that became necessary to combat the brave new world Earth came to become. Humanity had found a way to combat the radiation storms. 15 rounds. Miss Red. He'll see you now. The receptionist's perfectly pleasing voice couldn't have been more normal. Red staggered into the next room, adjusting her eyes against the sterile sanitizing light spectrum. "Hi, I'm Red. Pleasure to meet you," she said, grabbing the doctor's cold, unloving palm. His handshake was strong, supportive, and like the chemical fragrance that permeated, possessed an almost rubbery texture. "Hi, Red," he said, smiling. "You look wonderful." "Thank you," she said, still holding his grip. Her own body warmth transferred to his hands, softening their grip. "Would you like a coffee, some water?" he asked. "Oh, I'm fine, thank you. I want to ask you what you want upgraded." "Well, Miss Red, it's a strange matter." He held his gaze, amazed that his words were being dumbfounded by something about Red so alluring. It seemed as though the doctor would be the one playing patient this time around. Red moved slowly. With each closing step, the sterile air of the office changed much like the doctor's grip. Red placed her soft hands across the mass of his shoulders. The apprehension eased from the shock of tender touch. "It's all right if you're not sure yet. Lie on the table then, doctor. I'll see what I can do." Red's crimson lipstick glowed like hot iron in the pristine white room. Together they talked. The doctor had been overworked, busy, always pumping out loads of paperwork, but by himself. He needed an extra body to help him out. These were his needs. His eyes stayed entranced by the suave, sweet smile that Red kept as she listened intently. Every now and then she moved with agile fluidity, from her dangerous-looking boots all the way up her laceless vinyl shin guards all the way up to her jagged hips and skin-tight biker pants. The doctor eyed the riding crop expertly tucked inside the left ankle. She saw his gaze drift. Red pulled in, giving the doctor a clear view of her portable display. Beautiful pieces of ingenuity graced the screen. Her highlight products, all expertly built. Dash units. Their most intuitive computers out on the market, or so they were before humanity had faltered. He looked on with intrigue. The photos showed standard dash units, housed in polished chrome and wood. Deep mahogany against ivory white and black hole blue. Cherry red against golden trim. I've got them on the fastest processors out there. I'll take one, he said, making Red smile something devilish. The desk line in the reception office was stuck on hold. An in-use icon blinked steadily. The receptionist's phone lit up, ringing out a popular song from the radio. One of the lines went, "I've got a taste for you, it's at the Dada Deli. I'll make you a sandwich. Come see, come, boo-boo low up my telly. Meatballs and cha-cha cheese, sausage supreme, I'm at the Dada Deli. Come see, come see." Wiping the smeared mascara from her left eye, Red checked herself in the dashboard screen. Its map lit up. Next on the list was an antique electronics shop with an oversized cat on the roof. Tron prepped his gears to condition the drive into an optimal pace. His thrusters adjusted almost melodiously as he warmed up the second gear shift. The destination lit up on the windshield, highlighting an unpopulated area town. Tron's jets cooled as they passed what seemed to have been an iconic shopping plaza at one point. Red caressed Tron's controls, easing the power more. He cooed, simultaneously coasting to a full stop. Her heavy boots dragged across the seat as she hopped off, striking the ground, kicking dust. Red could feel every ray of sunlight here. Possibly only a very weak powered Red unit or a malfunctioning one was running. Her sensors showed it was safe to travel here with minimal protection, but she didn't want to chance it. Besides living in the desert, there was no escaping the harsh elements even with a double-insulated Red unit. Her skin was notched more uncomfortable under the tight-fitting synthetic material her clothes were made of. To someone maybe 5 years ago it might have looked like some costume from a sci-fi convention or a surfer with some designer wetsuit, space gear. Red clutched the necklace around her neck. A gleaming asymmetrically fabricated crystal gave off a faint opaque glint. A red crystal. An electric foghorn greeted her as she walked inside the chipped stucco complex. "Hello," Red announced. Her greeting reverberated across the piles of electronics stacked from the ground to ceiling. To her surprise, all the tiny contours of tin and aluminum and steel had absorbed and reflected her simple words, splitting the amplitudes, peaks and pitches into all sorts of ways. Similarly, hundreds of electronic speakers acted like mimics, translating her simple words into digitized versions, warped and altered 1,000 different ways. And then the computers responded. From one computer to the next, a crowd of conversation arose, discussing Red's simple hello. The computers in their own voices suggested she was a possible threat. Harsh beeps grew in intensity. From another set of computers, the digital voices pressed the counter-argument that she might be friendly. From another, they spoke about her weariness, her internal temperature, her approximate body mass, and even details about her biological composition. She thought to refrain from saying any more hellos. "You're here about the filters?" The words felt as though they were coming from the building itself, or perhaps all of those computers themselves. Again the room teemed with thousands of tiny computer voices discussing the happenings of their warehouse. "Are you?" Red looked down at her mobile. "Folio? The one and only. Thank you for stopping in." His heavy voice was like steak with the grain of a modem. On his shirt clung the scent of wet steel, and his words were draped in humble kindness. "I'm collecting specific ones," Red said. "The ZX Sea Breezes are probably the easiest ones to find. I have a number of other parts to match up too if you have the time." "Yep, you're the one," he said smiling. Folio eyed the side table. "I looked through some of my wares earlier just before you came. I've got 3 just like it." "You're buying off the Silicon book rate?" His words were assuring and certain. The electronics whirred in excitement. Somewhere in the room older processors made heavy oscillating noises as though they were struggling on their last circuits. A digital slew of coughs and chokes. "If they're good I'll take them at that." "Where are they?" Behind Folio were rows of shelves. More stacks of portable computers lined the shelves like books in a library. Red was amazed at the huge variety and apparent good condition of them all. Before specializing in dashes, Red had sought out devices just like these. Superclocked ones and windowless ones. Teal ones and gold ones, paper-thin ones and virtual ones. There were collector's editions and devices owned by late and great app developers. Signed autographed ones and ones with the digital seal of authenticity would gain especially good returns. Collecting computers could be said to have been an obscurely luxurious venture in the tech age. Digital enthusiasts dared to possess many of the unique and rarefied gadgets that brilliant engineers had once used. Party hosts might use them on occasion to impress guests, just as families would do with rare dinnerware and silver sets. That is, until the storms and devastation. Forleo wrestled with a hobble in his step, trying to downplay his less than graceful movements. "This one is a beauty," he said, placing his hand on a silver matte cylinder. Red gazed at it. It was a ZX. The magnetic finish showed off its signature maker's mark. And there, the mismatched brand near the serial number was proof it was one off the Cobalt production line. "If you're not a stickler for finishes, I have some scratched ones. But all the parts work great. They just need new cores and I bet they'd run fine." "They look great," Red said. She eyed the 3 small machines on the table. A teal sat next to a silver one. The middle one had been the one with the most promise. Its subtle blue rim design suggested it was an earlier build, probably with most of the necessary parts inside. "How's $550 for the silver and teal and $800 for the aqua?" Leaving her lips, Red's proposal felt more like a statement. Forleo shook his head. "She'll soften around the edges in time," he thought. The wall of chaotic computer noises chirped gleefully. "How can I say no?" he said, giving a boisterous laugh. The look in his eyes said he was going against his better judgment. She was getting a good deal, considering. "I wish I could do what you do," he said. "You restore them, no?" "Yeah. They're fine little guys. Who knew they'd turn out to be so useful these days?" These ZXs wouldn't be much trouble for her. The one on the left just needed a few motor bearings and 1 or 2 other generic computer chips. The other would need new crystals. They were just simple household appliances at one time. "You'll keep hunting for more, Miss Rosalie." "Miss Rosalie then." "Yeah, I need more of them." "Well, I think my partner might have the name of another place in town if you're not too busy. He doesn't sell parts, but he has been a savior when I'm searching for hard-to-find extras. Here, I'll point you in the right direction. Just make sure he treats you right." Forleo shifted over to another desk. "Navi, directions to Clark's shop, please." A heavy-sounding computer sirened in a musical array of calculations. "Directions found," Navi said. "You say he is your business partner?" Red asked. "One of many." The man's chuckle was a welcome sound in the dim-lit warehouse. "I am Forleo, as you know. White parties, black ties. I've had many people helped in my life. I may have many answers you might need as well." Forleo pulled the newly printed card chip from a little machine. "This is his address. I'll call him to let you know he's coming. Visit me again when there is time." Red smiled. "Thanks." She put the chip away. "Plus he's a great man. If you came in looking for any other parts, one would be tempted to sell you some of my long-distance scanners. Just got a van shipment of crap last month, nearly working condition. They just need some fusion cores. Everything does these days anymore, don't they?" There weren't many contacts Red had kept in touch with since she had left Vegas. It was a nice feeling to be finding a potentially reliable reference. "I know people have gotten rougher since the storms. Don't worry though about me. I'll always be the same. Always have been, always will." Forleo seemed to be laughing himself silly. "Well, thanks for the parts," Red said. With that she left, her 3 purchases neatly packed into her satchel, now filled. "Thank you for coming," Forleo shouted through the screen door. Another stop today might be overload, but Red was interested in this Clark. He might make repairing the ZXs much easier. She slipped the card along Tron's scanner. "Hey there, cowboy," Tron said. His sensors playing light show. The mapping system popped up, searching for Clark's shop. It was just down the street. "Hey," Red shouted. Tron's unit froze, disconnecting the main screen. The computer must have frozen briefly. Now popping back on, The navigation recalibrates, setting the directions somewhere near the new old town. OK, location confirmed. Ready, Tron says. His engine already warming up for first gear. The low hum of the bike lit up in conjunction with the anti-gravitational thrusters, flaring out dust clouds as Red rides down the highway road. Next stop, Clark's. Red arrived at a large skyrise hotel. 66, 67. 68th floor perhaps. During sporadic moments Red checked Tron's uplink. He was remapping his drives and rerouting coordinates. That really must have been some glitchy chip. Just adjacent to the massive hotel tower was the valet roundabout, overgrown with desert grass. Even after all this time, the pastel Hawaiian decor of the lobby showed. Long since barricaded enclosures stood in pieces, transforming the once luxurious grand entrance into what looked like a war zone. From ground level, the rooms on the first and second floors had been gutted and transformed into commercial shops, advertising their wares and services with cheaply made signs. Above that, the next 10 or so floors showed off signs of being lived in permanently. Tron beeped on Red's headset, indicating he would make himself scarce. "Don't forget to knock once and open twice," he joked through the comlink. Just as she began making her way inside, Tron's engine disappeared down a garage parking ramp. "Fucking cunt," Red mumbled, giving the impatient bike a read between the lines sort of gesture. 16, Clark. 8 floors up. A bride-to-be ran across the hall in barely her maiden form dress as she beamed with ecstasy. Lilac petals and satin shreds fluctuated across her gown like the ripples of a mirage effect. Some of her wedding party followed, belligerently spilling over the halls with party favors and sloppy champagne. The glimpse was only momentary. Red's elevator capsule cleared the floor of the hoarding wedding party as it moved higher up. Red continued to gaze out of the glass double doors of her elevator capsule. A few floors higher, Red could see couples making out, arguing. A small boy was throwing a ball around. Somewhere near the 15th floor a man lay passed out against the door to his room. The hallways seemed to age slightly with every floor. Red's elevator neared the 20th floor now. This hallway stood char black, like a fire had long been extinguished. She was on the 24th floor now. A massive hole in the side of the entire building cleared most of the floor. It appeared to affect a handful of the floors above as well. Luckily the elevator Red rode in lay untouched, but only narrowly. Finally the floors were solid again. She was on the 32nd floor now. Harsh patches of light shone through various segments of the hallways. Red had guessed pieces of the outside walls had been destroyed, letting in the afternoon sun. The floors and their patrons looked more unstable with every additional level. An edgy woman huddled in a corner with a pile of intravenous applicators at her feet. A companion paced in circles pulling at his forehead. Another floor up, piles of bottles littered the hall. "Hey, while you're up there, bring me back some Primo coolant," Tron chimed in cheerfully. Red nearly jumped from surprise. "Tron, fuck. Hey Tron." She waited for him to respond. No reply. It was possible she had just gone further than her comlink's reach. The elevator chimed a weakened ding as it reached its plateau at floor 68. The opaque double doors parted, letting in that glaring afternoon sun. How safe could the structure be up here? She scanned the room. Along the left side most of the pre-existing hotel room walls had been left intact, while the entire right had been cleared completely. This floor looked nothing like the others. In contrast to the hotel's theme of post-apocalyptic wallpaper shreds and broken peach tiles, this level sported nearly new metal plate floors that swept right into lacquered synthetic hardwood walls. A hastily parked quadcopter had left the only visible marks on the floor, scrapes from landing, leaving some nasty gashes near a visibly gaping hole in the outside wall. "Hello, Clark?" Red asked. The howl of the wind returned her call. No answer. Red carefully made her way across the floor. She was about a quarter of the way across when she spotted what looked like the silhouette of a desk against a bay window. To her left a shower ran from one of the hotel rooms. She knocked. "Clark?" No answer. Red pushed the door, stepping inside. A cold ring of metal met the side of her head. It was the nozzle of a gun. "And you are?" The owner of said gun, stark naked, spoke with confidence in spite of his vulnerability. Red. Her own hand had instantly been drawn to the trigger of her belt's force field detonator. I called. If she could reach it faster, an incredible 40,000 Newton force of reverse polarity electrical surge would disorient and repel most organic and inorganic compounds at the radius of about 3 meters. He waited stupidly, recollecting that Red's answer vaguely made sense. "Oh, that's right," he said as he pulled the gun away and walked over to a nearby secretary desk to pop on a set of pants, followed by setting his gun in an attached hidden holster. "My apologies. Folio." "Folio," Red repeated. "Right. Well, this way then." Red followed him into the next salvaged hotel room. "By the way, the name's Clark," he said, reaching for a key card. "I'd guessed." Floor-to-ceiling stacks of hard insulated cases made up most of the furniture in this room. Clark picked one up. "It's a mod kit just for you," he said. "For what?" Red asked. He laughed. "He said you were the right one." Clark's gun was again directed at her. "No, I don't need this," Red said sternly. Clark's gun stayed on her. "Oh, believe me, you'll be glad you took it." He lifted his aim once more. Red had guessed he was nose deep in something from the streets. She placed her hand on the insulated case. There was no way Red was prepared for Clark's wares. Mod kits were slick setups, but she didn't have the time to learn a whole new line of technology. Mid kits could program weapons, dashes, and even hack airships. They were designed by militant groups and coveted by backwoods weapons enthusiasts. And while they seemed to be great pieces of weaponry, militia personnel often ignored their existence. Red tried to stray from heavy weaponry. Complex weapons attracted complex enemies. Clark shoved the box closer to Red. "Why did Folio want me to have this?" "Who's Folio again?" His eyes seemed to be expressing something with heavy intent. "Take it." "I'm busy." Red gripped the handle now. She could tell it held military-grade plastics. A rare quality material these days. The whole thing was wrapped in an encrypted virtual lock mechanism. Clark walked away, humming to himself some shower tune. The case wasn't what she wanted. What if it had a GPS on board? What if one of the rival city gangs were looking for it? She had deliveries to do. This wasn't the time to be some danger group's decoy. "You won't regret it." His echo reached her at the elevator. The double doors closed as the elevator beeped out in digital voice ground floor. "Nice gift," Tron announced. He was waiting at the valet roundabout. "Let's just go, Tron." Red didn't bother looking at the case after putting it in her pack. She still had more to do on her route. 17. Mushroom clouds. "That's $200 short, bub. What's the deal?" Red nearly spit out her mouthful of carbon nectar. She set the glass down in case Bub had any more surprises, causing her to start throwing things. He looked at his watch. "It's 2:30. You're late. I needed another one for parts since yesterday and this delay's been pushing it." "Girl, you're trying your luck on me. Do you know how much I lost today because of 2 hours? If anything, I would say my payment cut was generous." Red lost her temper. "You're a shithead. What if I say you might never get another shipment from me?" Bub just laughed. Okay, don't get too worked up, little one. And I'll tell you what. Bring me the next set on time and I'll give you 100 bonus. If it's late again, we'll stick with our new payment rates. What do you say?" Red wanted to hit something bad. "Guess I'll see you next week. But don't expect first dibs." She couldn't speak smoothly. The man with the throaty voice laughed. He was known to most as Bub. Not a nickname he chose, it just stuck. And she didn't even see him every time she came into town. But when she did, Bub gave her the same pissed-off feeling she always got from him. Shoulda learned. But the steady money kept him as a regular. Red left with the envelope in hand. In it was Bub's promised payment, minus the 200. Well, it was another week, she thought. And she had the cash. Complaining anymore wouldn't do a difference. The mad vibes coming from Bub's tainted desert hole were behind her for now. The thought that the distance growing between them grew every second helped her frustration fall away. Riding had that effect. Tron, put on some music please. He complied, putting on a soft rhythmic ballad. Tron added his own instrument to the song by humming along in an alternative key. He completed his expression with emulated drum beats and an additional layer of synthesized vocal chords. Thanks, she said, feeling her tension ease away. Red looked around her. She had open road. It was as clear a day as it's been in months. The world was serene. And then the sky flashed white, a quick blinding light spilled over everything in sight. Red tried to shield her eyes with little effect. The flash of flight faded, receding as quickly as it came. The world appeared to have fewer colors in it to Red's eyes. Like standing in the wake of a cold chill, she stood frozen, shifting Tron down a gear. The reeds of sand grass along the roadside quivered, with each second more chaotically. Every loose leaf across the land picked up, now thrashing about. Red turned her head slightly only to be met by a fast-moving wall of sand. She kept Tron steady with weakening success. "Tron, halt!" she yelled, fighting words over the heavy whistle of an upturning desert. Tron gritted to a complete stop, biting into the windstorm. 7 bolts of light now sped across the sky overhead going into the direction of the torrential wind blast. Red watched as they moved like high-powered flares ion nearly a mile up. And then she saw it. The destination of the 7 flares. Along the far end of town a billow of cloud mushroomed high into the sky. The immense plume stood maybe 150 stories tall now, erupting in slow-moving masses of plumage. "A nuclear explosion?" Red asked. No, Tron reported. The cloud was changing colors from ghostly white to rust, the color of the desert. Not harmful. An ambulance flew by, noisily making haste towards the mushroom cloud's direction. 2 more followed the first's lead. Shit, Red thought. Not good. Her curiosity took over and the next moment Tron was racing to catch up to the darting ambulances. "You're 2 sovereigns short of a sensible purse," Girl Red said to herself. God, she needed to stop talking to herself. What else was there to do on a day like this though? She eyed the ominous cloud. It sure looked like those photos of nuclear explosions. "You sure there's no radiation, Tron?" "Well, there are a number of radioisotopes % at the activity site. Trace amounts of carbon-14, potassium-40, thorium-223, and polonium-218. These pose little harm as they are naturally occurring. I am searching for more lethal isotopes. No signs of strontium-94, 90, or 89. I will continue searching." This was all Red needed. She had to see what made the blast. The target location was maybe 10 miles away. Could be an alien ship, Red thought, remembering the fast-moving flares. Tron was topping 120 kilometers per hour now. Oh no, Red thought. Another wave of energy came shooting at her. This time a less blinding pulsation of plasmic white. It resonated from the blast site. Red stayed full speed, driving through it, not paying attention to the distortion field that briefly followed. Another wave ensued some 10 seconds later, then another. "Tron, hit the gears," Red shouted, choking the accelerator. There, she could see what lied underneath the blast. Like a ghost ship beneath the fog, a cracking relic of a retrofitted casino sat beneath the grand cape of Mushroom Cloud. How insane. The building was still intact. That explosion, if anything, had only shattered a number of windows. From this distance she could see inconsistently solid segments of reflective glass coming off the building. The blast recoil was much settled now, streams of sediment were barely visible, taking to the air like breaths of fog on a cold day. Still Red sped ahead, immediately surprised that she had just surpassed the troop of ambulances. "Ha-ha, suckers," Tron shouted, feeling much emasculated for having overtaken an emergency vehicle. Red looked back at the ambulances. Were they stalled? Sometime in the past few moments, the ambulances seemed to have slowed to a stop. Sometime during the sonic boom they seemed to have frozen. 18. Mother and daughter photo. "Just take our picture." A woman waved menacing claws at an older man as her daughter watched incredulously. He looked torn between snapping the photo and following the advice of his weak knees to run. His eyes squinted out helplessly, A tourist conned into some ploy put on by these two women. He reluctantly positions the camera, snapping vacation shots of this ghostly hotel. Red looks on in awe. Several small groups of brash tourists energetically observe Ground Zero. Red can't help feel sorry for the man with the camera. He doesn't share the other tourists' humor. Red then notices the tourists, already their eagerly confused anger make them odd sights. The bloody smears and scrapes across their clothes, faces and arms provide additional questions. The cameraman's own shaky hands share the same wound treatment, discolored patches of blood and bruises. He gives a half-hearted smile as he hands back the camera. The greedy duo pore over the viewfinder. I'm dreaming, Red thought, flinching as she hears the sound of the ambulance, distorted and stretched, come up behind her. No, the ambulance hasn't yet arrived. As Red listens, she can swear she hears the sound of her own bike, distorted as well. She looks over at Tron. His engine lights are off. The mother erratically yells, "Move, move now. Here, here." Her whole body language is strained, frantic. She undoubtedly has an accent Red has never heard. So far the tourists haven't paid notice of Red. From the look of the cameraman, Red thinks this is probably for the better. The sky darkens. The sun seems to have taken heed of the cameraman and hides behind the western horizon. Daylight has flown away, taking with it the rose-colored sunset. Now the stars buzz about the sky like stripes of curved paint. Do the tourists notice? They too seem to be moving as quickly as the stars, translucent streaks of light across the earth. No sign of the ambulance. Red still hears its ghostly echo in her head. And then a flash of light, like the first. The image of the mom and daughter are gone. In their place, two other women stand, each appearing like 30 years aged versions of the people standing there previously. These women as well are poring over a camera, thickly dried blood splatters rest on their clothing in all the same places. A man 30 years older than the original photographer walks away hopelessly towards that ghost hotel with heavy foot. He holds his arms outstretched to the sky as asking why. The women pay him no notice. Their eyes still chattily peruse the photos. He has helped them get their prize shots. His concern from them is needed no longer. The older women speak in quick, harsh tongue, perhaps a non-English language. Ixnaz. Ord di sona, Yulba, the older one says. The pitch darkness of twilight comes for a brief moment again, followed by the sun returning. Red tries to focus on the women's conversation, hoping to catch some body language at least. They do not move very approachably. Red tried to keep her eyes and ears focused, but this ordeal has been too much of a strain on her. She staggered slightly. The heat of the desert sun rode in. Red nearly staggered again, but keeps listening to the women. Di ilignistance. Finit. Alegi har sus wii amina. Not any words she knew. Yes, this should be a dream then. Or did Bub drug her? He drugged her. She'd taken water at his place. Red wanted to fly into a fury, her arms barely able to ball a fist. No wonder she was tripping. He must have. Fucking crook. And she was driving too. So fucking dangerous. Thank Athena Tron did most of the navigating. Red needed to sit down but there was nothing to rest on. Her mobile began blinking. Red popped the screen on. The device felt different somehow. Well, it did look like her phone. Something was a bit different though. It felt heavier, smoother, something. Or what now? I can't concentrate. She tried to read the screen through blurred vision. Think, girl. Focus on what it was that you were trying to focus on. Her mind was still in a state of distortion. The words looked like scribbles. Is it a message from Flit? Is it Flit? Just read the screen. She panicked and shut the phone, jammed it in her jacket and started to walk away. Unconsciously she followed the same path as the depressed photographer. A familiar voice spoke. Something about this. Meditation is hard to do in here, isn't it? Red looked around. First she looked up, hoping it was God. I would like there to be no interruptions, please. No interruptions. The voice spoke in calm semblances of speech separated by pauses for breathing and choosing words. Just, Just I need to tune out the other stuff. It was somebody she spoke to recently. The complicated stuff. Look at all these variables. You see it, don't you? I have to concentrate. Concentrate. Until my own things become all things. And all things become. Red knew who it was now. She turned around to see him sitting on a rock behind her. Dharma. Look at this place. Look at how many holes are in the sand. What sort of graveyard is this? Who made all of these? So many bodies. He made a tch sound with his tongue. You made all these. He looked out across the desert. Red peered on with him. Before them were a handful of hold, sized large enough for bodies. She eyed something poking out of one of the holes, a long slender leg and what appeared to be the corner of a flamingo-plumed show dress. No. Red stammered. Why is everyone making holes and imagining bodies out here? Oh look, some of these plots have cute little mobster briefcases next to them. Thank goodness for a little creativity here and there. Here, grab a shovel, toots. Red stood dumbstruck. Taking her eyes off of the set of holes, she looked over to Dharma again. And as though the visor of a virtual reality simulation had been lifted, or was it placed on her, she now realized she was standing in the middle of literally thousands of burial plots. How did these? She could see deep holes accompanied by makeshift body bags and black Camaros parked alongside. Some plots were sparse with a simple spade and a hastily tossed body. Others had a more expensive-looking setup adorned with leather-seated Cadillacs teetering on the edge. As far as the eyes could see, corpses glittering with cheap jewelry, sequined dresses, and expensive suits rested within most every hole. Few were empty, or yet to be filled. Don't worry. Not all of these exist at the same time, Dharma said confidently. Sure enough, Red took note. At random intervals, some of those burial plots with their accompanied mobster cars and shovels fizzled out of existence for fractions of seconds, then returned. The whole graveyard was going spastic in this way. Nope, how tacky, Dharma said. He took both hands like a photographer setting up a shot to lock in and block out his point of view. Those hands seemed to be glowing. Red watched carefully as a prism of colors rose around them. Dharma stayed concentrating, speaking quietly, always very intently as he directed his hands at specific plots that seemed to be dematerializing and materializing at a comparatively more accelerated rate. They gradually materialized less often until not at all, and then he would focus on another plot, car, bodies, and plot combined. Here, help me, Dharma said. We have a lot of chaos to undo. Dharma? Red dropped the shovel Dharma had handed her. Dharma? The explosion? He chuckled. Not to worry, sweetie. Here, stop imagining those things. My mind can't focus all at once, what with this mess. I'm not. Dharma stayed busy, waving disaster plots away. Every now and then, after waving one set of plots away, another few might appear elsewhere. Dharma would just give an well and continue his efforts. His hands stayed busy, projected colorful energy, and the unstable assortment of burial plots grew more manageable with every minute. And not even give a fraction of a thought to it all. Just my own perfect world, all of my own. He mumbled small words and phrases like this. The words almost bounced into a melody, like a working song. Red much liked the tune. It sounded familiar somehow. She wondered, was that the same song Tron sang earlier? Either way, Red was feeling better. She went back to the question of whether she was under the spell of some roofie bub might have slipped her. Possibly this wasn't that. She wasn't sure. Something about this felt different. A solid lead barrier might stop the outside world from seeping in, Dharma said, now pausing from all the dematerializing work. I need to create one that is purely me. With a quick clap of his hands, Dharma manifested a spark of light. Red remembered the precursor to the mushroom cloud. Is it working? Dharma looked excitedly at his work. Did I do it? He was fumbling with a computer in his hand. Tachyons, he mumbled. Can't get them right. Red sat dumbstruck, still speechlessly observing the tiny guy's light show and song number. Success. It's a dream come true. His head rose a few inches. Oh. He breathed in. Oh, no luck. Reset then. He pressed a button on the console. The desert graveyard faded away, subtly replaced by a large dark room. In its center, a single 6-foot cube, jet black with glowing lime seams ran along the contours. The massive object levitated on its axis, humming monotonously. It's a control center, obviously, Dharma announced. I made it. Red nodded. She could feel her motor skills returning full force now. This was certainly not reality, or hers anyway. She felt her forehead, in case the cause of her delusions might be a fever. The room changed again. They were back in the desert, surrounded again by the nightmarish patches of uncovered earth and death wagons. This time that cube hung floated nearby. Great, another creepy thing to have around, Red said. She eyed its 6 sides and 8 corners. Sides as smooth as glass and 2 very unique curvatures, opaque indentations where effervescent light could be seen glowing inside. What was so special about this thing? Dharma looked up from his mobile. This. I'm programming it. It's a computer. Yes. She checked her side bag. A duplicate of Dharma's computer console sat inside. Strange, Red thought as she examined it. The screen appeared to have the same interface as the one in Dharma's hands. Would it be safe to toy with this thing? She wondered. Red didn't want to touch her screen, afraid it might upset whatever it was Dharma was doing. Am I supposed to decipher this fantasy? Red thought. There were still thousands of holes to fill, but so far things seemed to be progressing. He looked up from his work at Red, a sly smile hiding behind his look of concentration. You can help me. 19. Before. Red met Dharma a year ago in a dream. She wasn't sure how their meetings came to be. They'd never met in the real world, yet one night when Red was feeling particularly serene, they crossed paths and then not again for weeks. Then they just kept meeting almost regularly. Simple astral encounters. Insofar Red learned that Dharma was a computer scientist. She learned he had bouts of depression, and that he liked the computer simulation board game Feudal Anarchy. He was a bit nocturnal in his habits and he took a large number of naps during the daytime. So did she. They had met during one of these. It's not just a dream, Dharma would say. Red remembered sitting near some watercolor landscape come to life as she looked out over a wall of falling water. Red touched the cube now. Cool, like a glass window pane. 2 things ran through her mind. 1, she was awake, and very conscious of that fact. Tron would be parked not 50 yards away. She'd driven here and everything was, horrifyingly, as she remembered. The second idea was that she still wasn't sure if Bub might have slipped her something awful, making her have these disjointed visions. Was she or wasn't she awake? Dharma was here though. The world still spun. 2 sets of intense eyes watching Red and Dharma. Red flinched, realizing who it was. There, just a few yards away, were those strange women, both eyeing her suspiciously. Their silent stares and almost unreal stillness rattled Red's confidence. Creepy women, Red said under her breath. Dharma was still busying himself with his calculations. It is you who creeps us out, weird one. The older of the women said. She was undeniably fluent in English. Who are you? It was all Red could think of asking. These were the crazies from earlier. Me. I'm a girl. Just a girl. The younger one said. She displayed what was an accurate imitation of innocence. Girl, don't lie to me. What in the hell was that back there? The sun was spinning like crazy, the moon, the earth, everything. I'm girl enough to know who I am. That should be answer enough. I think you should ask who you are. She spoke accusingly and stepped closer with a sharply pointed finger. It's not like us to speak of ourselves so freely. We are decent enough people. That is all you need to know. And trust me. We are very credible. Take what you will, but don't tamper the stone. I'm Red. Red said. They laughed, sharing a high-pitched giggle reminiscent of dolphins. I think we'd better back off. These witches are mental. Red said to Dharma, who was staying close to his levitating cube, anxiously typing away calculations on his device. Please tell me we're dreaming. Red thought to herself. She kept back, stepping away. The menacing women, Were they levitating? The gap between them and Red narrowed. Unnoticeable narrowing. But the space between them was most definitely minimizing. Red ran to Dharma's side behind the floating cube. Dharma. No shit. He whispered. The soft clicks of digital keys might have been louder than his unconfident words. The women looked at each other, sharing dark glances. She thinks it is important. The older one whispered. The younger one echoed important. A lightning-fast shock of cold shot through Red's body. The intent of malice filled the air. Red's comm link rang. Tron spoke softly in her ear. Call from Dharma. Red looked over at him, still busily typing up a storm. That's not me. I'm right here, he whispered, nearly yelling in raspy, breathless words. Red wanted to do a double take, but the presence of urgency was pressing heavily. Red brashly put her comm link on only to be greeted with the voice of Dharma yelling, "Wake up." How? Red yelled back. Dharma broke his concentration, recognizing the voice on the comm link to be authentic. Then noticing the proximity of the two women, he turned pale. Dharma switched back to his device, minimizing his current process, and opened another. He typed an emergency command. The crumbling hotel emitted another wave of distortion light energy, nearly knocking Dharma and Red off their balance. Dharma's cube started glowing, and just as gradually, spun on its axis at an accelerated rate. The women walked closer, both refusing to break their stares. Yes, Dharma yelled. The emergency process had initiated. Fragments of some other dimension seemed to be breaking open along the contours of that spinning cube. It looked like a dark, unoccupied room inside the fragments. Another shockwave gave way from the hotel, causing a good deal of plaster and dust to fall off the facade. The desert ground shook in unison with the light pulse. The whole world flickered. The desert was now an after-hours office building, then the desert again. Another transformation. They were inside the crumbling hotel foyer, tattered curtains hung above every indoor boutique window, then back at the same desert spot. The woman was sidestepping around the cube now. Her humid laugh shook him to the core as she stepped ever closer. She was feeling amused. A low laugh came from deep inside of her. The women spoke to each other in their shared foreign tongue. Dharma furiously typed in more commands, his fingers clumsily holding on. Let's go. Red tugged his shoulder. The younger woman was now pulling some sort of compact from her pocket. She looked into it, whispering something inaudible. The older one gripped something very solid that, if Red wasn't mistaken, had just materialized beneath the folds of her long dress. Red wanted to pull Dharma from his console and sprint to safety. She would run towards Tron. He could carry them both. The world flickered again. They were momentarily transported back inside the crumbling hotel. The walls were showing signs of its losing to their last efforts as other parts of the hotel were giving way. Already several support beams had lost the fight and lain dead on the broken marble floor. The light from the pulsar waves were dormant inside here, not like the blasts of energy outside. Red gaped in momentary awe as she saw the waves of light streaming everywhere like sleeping underwater plants swaying about under the ocean current. Dharma didn't budge. He was nearly finished, he could feel it. Where's that photographer? Red thought, remembering that he had ran into the hotel earlier. Of all the places to run to, he chose this unstable building. Maybe there was a reason. Red glanced around. The whole inside was lit up by the swaying light, illuminating nothing but collapsing interiors and wreckage. Red had another thought. Tron, I need backup. The only answer was static as it came in through the earpiece like a scrambled message. Light streamed through the exterior windows of the hotel. The sun had hastily risen once more, only to be shadowed this time by dense cloud cover. The deep grayish-purple shade covered hid the sun's rays in a way that darkened Red's mood even more. From the darkened sky, green fibers burned their way across the heavy air, their light impressions multiplied exponentially as the dragon cloud roared overhead. A deafening thunderclap boomed. The orchestra of distant rainfall was rolling closer. It wouldn't be long before the desert would flood. Red couldn't keep backing away from this insane woman forever. Sooner or later she might lunge. Red looked down at what the woman concealed. It seemed to be giving off steam. A blade. Red glimpsed the razor-thin blade glinting from behind the folds of dress. Red looked away anxiously. Whatever that was, it looked wicked. Still, there were two of them. And the younger one, for some reason, worried Red more. That compact wasn't for makeup. That thing in her hand. Oh no, oh no. Dharma was panicking. The entire inside of the hotel filled with that effervescent plasmic light, blinding everything Red could see. The woman held the wickedly thin blade out towards Red, speaking in heavy words. Red's body lost every ounce of its strength in that moment. The plasmic light shot out in all directions. Work, damn it. Dharma was shouting at his console now. Just before losing all consciousness, Red saw she was simultaneously inside the hotel and back outside. The sea of graves had all returned, manifesting behind the final pulsation of light. She could barely hear his voice shouting, "Stay with me," as sparks of green light joined in the plasmic overload of light. Anything else after that was a complete blank. 20. Memory tear. In MOCO there's a history fair. I'll show you sometime. The performers come out and it's insane. Dharma's voice was surprisingly cheery. The scent of sagebrush filled Red's nostrils. The two of them were not in Vegas. It wasn't today. Months earlier, Red had sat with Dharma asking him about the world they met in. Listen. Do you hear that echo? She focused on the silence. I know it well. That's feedback, he said. The hum made a crystal chipping sound. Together with thousands of them, the noise churned like millions of glass beads pouring over one another. Red imagined sugar crystals and rushing water. That's it. I thought I was the only one who heard it. She grabbed his arm. Dharma, there's something going on with our dreams, she said, gripping his arm. Well, yeah, he laughed. This place. It is. He was hard pressed to pick the right words. Here, this might be a better way to explain it. He pulled his mobile out from his coat pocket to bring up an application. Animated mountain topography showed up. On top of that were trees sprouting from the ground. Red looked at the world she stood in. The earth around them was the same shape as that map. More surprisingly tiny trees grew from dots in the sand. I can make them, he said, beaming. Red got up and reached for one of the new sprouts by her feet. Her hands passed through it. A hologram? She tried to touch it again. Like a ghost apparition. I can't touch it. Dharma laughed. No, not yet. I'm working on it though. Okay, he pulled a stone from his side bag. Cat. The stone was a perfect circle. Harder and lighter than she imagined it to be. It took me a week to make. It's supposed to be granite. The memory faded away to darkness. Everything was darkness. Red wasn't sure if she was also darkness now. Looking at her hands, she saw the colors of flesh. It was clear again. She was in the Nevada desert, rain already pattering down atop her head and the whole foggy valley. A heavier storm was coming. There were no women or strange tourists around, yet Red was running. Dharma followed her hand in hand, lagging behind as they struggled to hold onto their good pace. Red checked her mobile. No service, no link to Tron either, nor any messages from him. The light distortions or the storm, something must be cutting off her communication. It happened when the storms were this supercharged. It meant it would be a long one. Red could feel her legs and arms, solid with energy, fluid and mobile. No hangover, no weary effects. Red slowed her run. Dharma too slowed. They were ankle deep in water and the winds were picking up now. Just off to the side a diner shone bleakly with dim lights. It might have been a separate but uniform part of the nearby hotel complex, that deteriorating vertical fish-shaped structure. They would take quick cover beneath the elongated roof extension while Red figured out what was happening. She kept her eyes darting from side to side, expecting those women to appear. They might be nearby still. Dharma looked down at the soaking earth. His own thoughts lost in his own world. It might have been midnight now. Time stood still now. The moon kept stationary, the sky refused to change colors. Then clap. A tear of lighting broke the static sky overhead. A green dragon of light ripped into existence, then disappeared back it. The storm broke in, bringing heavier droplets of rain with it. She could see the desert clearly again. Red checked her comm link again. Finally. A single atom hovered around the signal icon. "Tron, come pick me up. I'm soaked," Red said. "Course, milady." The seductive male computer voice piped up. "So good to hear you, you hunk of metal." "Vroom vroom," Tron joked. "You're the one, aren't you?" a familiar voice said. Dharma was gone now. That familiarity belonged to her, the woman with the compact. Red saw her now, long cheekbones and narrow lips. In half a second the woman was in Red's face. Red pulled up a fist. The woman's bony fingers caught it midway, effortlessly controlling Red's arm movements now. "I saw you come into town recently," she said. "We were going to bide our time, but I see you've found us sooner than we had hoped." The bony woman loosened her grip. "Please, let's talk, with more civility." "I don't know what you mean." "You were there, Red. We know you can see." "Call Dharma," Red whispered to Tron. The message Red processing as the only atom signal faded away. "Don't be afraid. We know you can see." "You can." Those threatening arms rose slightly, pulling Red's posture at a more uncomfortable angle. There was no place to move, she still had a good amount of strength holding Red's arm in place. "Yes, young one, let's talk with more civility." For a brief moment Red looked into the woman's eyes. She couldn't read her. The way she stared. Something said there was pain. And fury. Like the thunderclouds themselves had been caught deep in the irises. The clouds' mood swings seemed to be echoed in those lenses. Red wanted to look away, more than anything get away. The dragon sky roared, lighting up the sky with a blinding white. The world changed in that instant. The tiny motel room 10 minutes from Liana came into view. Red was laying atop that same mattress that felt like 1,000 other mattresses in 1,000 other single-floored motel rooms. On the floor of this one her bedsheets and pillows had been thrown off, from either the heat or a nightmare. She closed her eyes. That face was burned into her mind. That angry pursed smile connected to still moving eyes as violent as the monsoon. Red imagined the woman was still looking at her. The eyes stared emotionlessly as if they were trying to pierce Red's thoughts, they're inside the canvas of her inner eyelids. The thought scared Red. She ran to the window, peeking out of the double-layer curtains. No rain, no fog. Those women, the tall one and the other in the dream. "We know you can see." The voice echoed in Red's head, almost repeated. "Shake it off," Red yelled, now incredibly grateful it was all just a dream. Red went outside, not caring to put on shoes. The choking heat, that 118-degree heat felt good for once. Was this the next morning or had Red not started her day yet? She checked her pocket. Her hand found a crinkle of paper. That had to be Bub's envelope. "You're my daughter's friend, aren't you?" A woman in a polka dot blazer and neat golden curls retreated from the safety of a nearby doorway. Her hands were full with a bucket of tokens. A matching polka dot clutch sat inside. She was in her 50s, but still had good skin and makeup that looked like it had been applied at a boutique. "She told me about you. Lana. You remember Lana, don't you?" At this point the woman outstretched her hand. "I'm Ray Lynn. Lana's mom." Red's clothes were damp from sweating in her sleep. She couldn't move. The crisp powdery grip of the woman's hands woke up Red's senses, startling her worse than the thunder had. "Oh. Yes, I would know you anywhere. Red. You used to have after-school program with Lana." Red didn't remember. The name was familiar though. If the daughter looked anything like the mom, then it might have been that girl who sat by the door of science class. Red didn't talk to her more than 2 sentences in 4 years. Then one day out of the blue. It was the afternoon. A flicker of memory shot through Red's mind. Her lips and Lana's connected. "You were schoolmates. She would talk about you. Oh, you're so grown up. Gosh. How long has it been?" 5 years. Red gave a weak smile, slightly embarrassed to meet Lana's mother in a place like this. But if she didn't remember much, why worry? How is Lana? Red asked, still feeling bothered by her dreams or the fact that she had Bub's envelope. Oh well, she's interning at Mills Valley now. Doing science research. Just like always. Science, 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 always doing science. A light giggle followed. How's your mother? In high school? This woman remembered her from high school? Lana, who goes to Mills Valley. That was halfway up the state. Your daughter went there. The woman smiled. She's always been on top of her game, you know. The glimmer of a proud mom shone through. Anyway, I hope your family troubles haven't gotten you down. I know it's hard in these times, but… The lightning storm filled the woman's eyes. That's what you get for being a little whore. The bucket of tokens dropped from Raylin's hands, glimmers of metallic bronze fell into mid-air. The adrenaline came into Red's veins heavier than full force, propelling her into a backwards fall. Nearly not a second too soon, the woman produced a fast-moving object from her concealed polka dot clutch, directing it straight for Red's heart. She saw the blade coming. Oh no! Already her body's backwards staggering momentum was locked in motion. Red would near immediately come in contact with the blow. It could have been adrenaline. Red felt something rise within her. Heat and frustration. Her muscle ignited as chemicals in her brain pumped through her veins faster than light, accelerating her concentration. Her own cells were alive with new desire. Something within them took control as Red looked on her world in slow motion. The clouds in Raylin's eyes, they moved rapidly like the ones in her dream. But now they were slowing. Was that just light playing a trick, or was that really how fast the world was moving? Red felt like she had more choices even as she stumbled backwards, moving her body downward faster, moving her arms to catch her descent. The rapidly closing gap between Raylin's blade and Red's chest was now widening as she crashed to the ground. The thin, razor-sharp blade was a beautiful piece. The fine handle was polished gold, embroidered with an ornate Chinese dragon curving around its handle. In the spine of the weapon, unseen by casual eyes, was a liquid applicator. A poison-tipped knife. Red watched a droplet of tinted green liquid hang off of the end of the blade. The bucket of coins splattered to the ground. God damn it, get up. Get away from her. Red thought as she picked herself up off the ground, lunging backwards into a continuous free fall. Raylin was already calculating the third swing as she propelled the blade forward once more. Red fell against the wall as she struggled to grip anything solid, nearly losing her balance with every movement. The blade missed, but lunged forward again in a single swoop. Red let momentum direct her body away once more. Gah! Raylin shouted out of frustration. She was getting wiser to Red's movement, but was also losing accuracy as she began swinging recklessly. Finally, Red's feet gained a tiny foothold of balance just as Raylin's swings fell out of synchronicity. Red's pumped a monstrous thrust upward as she scrambled away towards her motel room, barely slamming the door shut as the fine dragon blade pierced the dead center of the door, protruding halfway through. Seething lime liquid leaked from the tip. Almost immediately the thin blade retracted without warning and the entire motel went silent. Red dared not move a millimeter. She lay staring at the door wide-eyed, unable to see anything as her brain struggled to process the last 10 nightmarish seconds. Red couldn't take it any longer. She plunged her vision into the eye hole. No Raylin in sight. Just an empty corridor with casino coins were scattered everywhere. Red knew she had to leave right now. In her bathroom was an emergency kit, a taser and a set of force field repellents. Red's body was quivering beyond control. She might be running on muscle memory at this point. The cells in her body moved for her as her mind kept playing over those 10 seconds over again. She had her bag. Now she was throwing her body into a run towards the back of the motel room just as she heard a crack from the front door. Red snapped out of her paralysis and threw off the lights from a nearby switch as she spiritedly eyed the reflections from a glass-framed landscape painting. She held herself perfectly still in the pitch black of that room. Red wanted to breathe. The air inside of her felt like choking. She needed to breathe. Breathe in. She took a small gasp. The body at the door moved. Fast. Straight towards the back of the room where Red stood frozen. She could only anticipate contact. Briri Iep. A huge crack of electric light came forth from Red's hand as she sent forth a blast from the modified taser in her hand. The electric surge went straight into the figure in the darkness nearly against her. Electric green Tesla firepower threw the aggressor backwards nearly into the wall. It was undeterred, bouncing up immediately as it used the motel furniture to propel it forward again. Red's phone lit up, illuminating Ray Lynn's unemotional gaze now coming right at her with the same incredible speed. Dharma calling. The comm link answered itself. Where are you? Dharma screamed. His scream shook Red's nerves, pressing everything that was happening into a tiny space at the forefront of her mind. Everything inside her head went black. Red stared blankly at that microscopic moment. Red blinked. It was raining again. She was standing under the diner's porch roof, listening to heavy raindrops fall on aluminum panels. The wind was frigid on Red's skin even though it was at least 100 degrees earlier that day. She could feel her core temperature dropping. The earth was shaking, or it could have been her nerves. Her mobile flashed the words Dharma calling. It's all right, he said. I think we got separated. He was breathing heavily. I'm inside the hotel. Red could see it across the parking lot. That building. A searing pain jabbed at her side. Red looked down to see a stain of green bleed into her shirt. The words "we know you can see. You can" came into Red's mind. The words of that woman. What did she mean? Oh, Red. No, I don't think you're ready just yet, the lady with the compact said. She was standing behind Red, grabbing her by the throat with one hand and holding the dragon blade in the other, right against the searing spot in Red's side. It took every ounce of energy for Red to kick the woman backwards. Her heavy biker boot planted itself square into a fleshy spot as it thrust with every ounce of energy. The woman shrieked in agony as she was thrown, but not before twisting that sliver of metal partially into Red's side. Dharma's tiny voice chirped, "Okay, it's ready." The sky lit up with one very strong shock wave of distorted light, changing the desert landscape for the final time. Through the blaze of light, shreds of an orange glow office materialized. Red caught a glimpse of the levitating cube beneath an unmoving ceiling fan and a neat row of office chairs as the light from her eyes gave out. This is the end of part 1.